Chapter 1410. Long Zitian's voice came again, which made Long Yu raise his eyebrows. Since this guy refused to admit it, did he still have something else to say? Could it be that I really had such a romantic history in the past, and had a son like you? When Long Zitian said this, even his own tone was not very confident. He seemed to have some doubts about something. He was not doubting Long Yu, but his own appearance. This tone made Long Yu feel a little strange. Didn't this guy just firmly deny that he did not have a son? Don't you know what you have done? A cultivator's memory will improve as their cultivation increases. Commander Long, don't tease me. Long Yu said lightly. Whether Long Zitian was his father or not, for Long Yu, it did not affect him much. But for his mother, Bei Yu Yao, the impact was too big. Back then, the status of Bei Yu Yao and Long Zitian was completely different. Long Zitian was from a small country, while Bei Yu Yao was from the high and mighty Heavenly Mandate Sacred Institute. She was also the daughter of the dean. The two of them could be together, so there must be a layer of love between them. Now, Bei Yu Yao was still worried about Long Zitian. There was no doubt that if the two of them could be reconciled now, it would be considered as one of the things that Long Yu was worried about. Unfortunately, Long Zitian's current appearance obviously did not want to admit it. This gave Long Yu a headache. Juyo Realm, Heavenly Mandate Island, I will personally investigate it. If it is confirmed, I will be responsible for you. Long Zitian's words at this time changed from the joking tone he used before and seemed more serious. However, these words made Long Yu laugh. It is useless for you to investigate it now. The Juyo Realm has disappeared, and Heavenly Mandate Island has also completely disappeared. Only those people and those things should still remain in the hearts of some people. Since you do not want to verify it, there is nothing I can do. My memories don't start from that time. Long Zitian could hear the displeasure in Long Yu's words, but his tone was still indifferent. In short, when I woke up, I was in the Beyond Heaven world. I don't remember anything about the past. After that, I served in the Ascetic Alliance and the Battlefield Legion. I don't have any memories of my wife and children. When these words were spoken, Long Yu finally understood why Long Zitian would refuse to admit it. It turned out that this fellow had amnesia. According to him, he had just woken up in the outer heavens world and had been cultivating until now. He had not had any chance to get in touch with Long Yu, Bei Yu Yao, or the people on the Heavenly Mandate Island. Could it be that what Long Zitian said was true? However, regardless of whether what he said was true or not, Long Yu had nothing else to do now. If Long Zitian was pretending to have amnesia and deliberately did not want to admit about Bei Yu Yao and Long Yu, then Yi Fuqian could not force him to admit it. In the Beyond Heaven world, there was a paternity test method, but Long Yu did not think that he could force him to do it. After all, no matter what, Long Zitian was a commander of the Battlefield Legion and a powerful existence of the 7th level Great Ruler. Unless Long Yu reached this level one day, his position and that of Long Zitian were not equal. If he wanted to ask Long Zitian to do something, Long Zitian would have the reason and strength to refuse. If Long Zitian really had amnesia, then the situation was quite easy to deal with. Long Yu now had the 9 Underworlds tablet with him. The Small World and the New Martial World were also inside. Although the 9 Underworlds and the Divine Martial World were gone, the environment of the New Martial World was not much different from before. Most importantly, many people from the Great Tang Empire were in Long Yu's Small World. For example, the Jintian clan sect leader by Yunzong did not leave with Long Yu. Instead, he stayed in Long Yu's Small World and peacefully lived out the rest of his life. Bai Yunzong was not very old, but after experiencing so many things, he had lost the fighting spirit to advance further. Of course, the key was that he had found someone he loved and could not bear to be separated from his lover. The two of them had been living in the small dragon imperial world recently, living a paradise-like life. They seemed to have a baby already. At this moment, Long Yu could let Long Zitian enter his small world and see Bai Yunzong. As for the other people from the Great Tang Empire, the Chu Imperial Clan, the Mo Clan of the Xiang Clan, the Long Clan of the General Clan, and so on, many of them had been taken into the small world by Yuan Xin. If he wanted to find them, he he might not be able to. Since that's the case, do you want to meet the people from before? Maybe they will remind you of something? Long Yu asked tentatively. I do want to meet them, but now is not the time. Long Zai Tian laughed mischievously, as if he had returned to his previous amusing personality. Since you've come, follow this commander to watch a good show. What's going to happen in a while isn't something you can casually see. Of course, you're not someone who has never seen the world. You've even helped kill the demigods of the foreign races, but today's scene will definitely make you feel so good that you can't breathe. Long Yu really didn't know what could make him feel so good that he couldn't breathe. Even when he did it with Red Oriole, he didn't have a similar feeling. He really didn't know what it felt like to feel so good that he couldn't breathe. The Heavenly Dragon Army was carrying out their strategic deployment here. Now that Long Yu had come in, it was not convenient for him to leave immediately, as it might disrupt their strategic deployment plan. Since that was the case, Long Yu might as well stay and take a look. Then when things are over here, I'll bring some people meet you. In any case, they're all in my small world. I hope you can think of something because of this. Long Yu nodded and agreed to Long Zai Tian. Then he followed Long Zai Tian out of the room and headed towards the core of the entire steel fortress. Walking along the corridor, Long Yu noticed that after entering the core of the steel fortress, the walls on both sides of the corridor were covered with a faint layer of lightning. It was very obvious that it contained extremely tyrannical metal elemental primordial power. If the lightning energy on the walls was triggered, Long Yu was certain that with his cultivation and physical strength, he would definitely die. Long Zai Tian should be proficient in the power of lightning elemental divine runes, and it's very likely that he has already comprehended the metal elemental primordial power. As Long Yu thought to himself, he followed Long Zai Tian all the way to the core of the steel fortress. In this core area, many of Long Zai Tian's people were controlling the entire steel fortress, and from here, they could see some of the situation in the universe. Long Yu understood that there were so many scenes in this core area, and all of them were the situation when he first arrived in this universe. Thinking about it, when he just arrived here, his figure flashed, and he was discovered, and then those two people came out to look for him. Long Yu didn't ask Long Zai Tian what he had set up in this universe, but Long Yu couldn't help but feel the oppressive aura in this universe. If it was an ambush for the Fire God race, Long Yu really didn't think that the Fire God race would take the initiative to run into such an ambush. After all, the Fire God race's perception was very keen, and there was no reason for them not to feel the oppressive aura in this universe. To be cautious, they wouldn't rashly enter this universe. Who knew what kind of good show Long Zai Tian was talking about? Seeing that Long Zai Tian had actually brought Long Yu to this core area, some of the members of the Sky Dragon Legion who were originally here were a little surprised. Boss, this can't really be your son, right? He looks a lot like you. I think it's 80%. Otherwise, why would Boss bring him here? There are a lot of things here that are our Sky Dragon Legion secrets. The people in this place weren't serious at all, and they actually started talking at once. Long Yu also didn't expect this situation. He didn't expect that these people would actually ridicule his commander like this, and Long Zai Tian didn't seem to refute these people. All of you shut up and do your own things. Don't make this commander unhappy. Don't even think about getting the mission reward when we go back this time. Long Zai Tian looked around and snorted coldly. He sat in a position in the center, crossed his legs, and stared at the scenes in front of him. If one didn't know, they definitely wouldn't be able to tell that such a guy was actually the commander of a ruler legion. Boss, when the Fire God Legion runs over, maybe there will be a few Fire God race beauties. My collection will have some more collections. A very wretched short young man didn't care that Long Yu was next to him. He said this with a smile, causing a few people to look at him with disdain. Fire God race beauties? Although I know that you like to collect corpses, isn't your taste too heavy? Someone on the side said directly in disgust. Ignore him. This guy is purely sick in the head. When I think about me being in the same legion with such a guy, I can't help but lose my appetite. I can't eat every day. Another person made a vomiting motion. What do you guys know? This is art. Do you understand? The wretched short man looked around with disdain, and a lonely expression appeared in his eyes. Obviously, he felt that no one could understand him, and he was quite sad. But soon, he saw Long Yu, and his eyes suddenly lit up. "Hey, little boss, do you think this is considered art?" The wretched short young man raised his head at Long Yu and said, "Just like the fire god race, they are actually divided into genders, but they are not divided into men and women like us. Instead, there are 3 genders. The beauties among them are not very similar to others. Generally, they're the ones in charge of decision-making in the Fire God Legion. It is very difficult for ordinary people to see them. These corpses still have a lot of commemorative significance when we collect them." Long Yu's face darkened when he heard this. What kind of people are in the Sky Dragon Legion? Why are there all kinds of weirdos? Chapter 14:11. However, it had to be said that the wretched short youth seemed to have done a lot of research on the other races. His understanding of the Fire God race was far better than that of ordinary people. The Fire God race had 3 genders, and the females were the controllers and decision-makers. Long Yu didn't know about this, even after killing so many of the Fire God race. However, Long Yu didn't know why this guy was collecting the corpses of the other races. Was it really just for commemoration like he said, or was it for some special purpose? For example, like the ball soul that Long Yu saw before, collecting the corpses of the other races and refining them into puppets to fight for them. Long Yu could only keep this question in his heart. After all, he wasn't very familiar with the other party, so it wasn't convenient for him to casually ask. If he wasn't careful, he might accidentally touch on the other party's taboo. Long Yu didn't go inside. He just leaned against the steel wall behind him, feeling the weak flow of electricity. He wasn't hurt. However, this was under the condition that the lightning divine runes weren't activated. Once they were activated, Long Yu would probably die. Now that the entire steel building was hidden in the small world, it wouldn't be easy for the other races to find it. There was no need to worry about this thing suddenly activating. The others clearly saw Long Yu's actions, but they didn't come to warn him. It was obvious that nothing would happen. Long Yu leaned against the wall, leisurely looking at the scenes in front of him. The scenes were calm, and there was nothing in the silent void. There was only the faint starlight in the distance, slowly twinkling. The entire void was extremely calm. As time passed, everyone in the core area of the steel fortress quieted down. During this time, Long Yu saw one weirdo after another. Everyone in the Sky Dragon Legion had abnormal brains, and some were even weirder than the wretched short man. There was a guy who had strung together the power cores of the other races he had killed. For example, the fire core of the Fire God race, the ice core of the Ice God race, and so on. He strung them together into a large string of beads and hung it around his neck. Every single fire pill, ice pill, etc., came from the bodies of powerful outsiders at the 7th phase Sovereign Realm. There were at least 40 to 50 of them, and it was a shocking sight to behold. However, don't think about using this to deter those foreign races. Those foreign races would become even more enraged after seeing this. Even if he was in a group, those foreign races would still make him their first target. This thing, other than taunting, had no other use in battle. Although these fellows had their own personalities, there was no doubt that there were a total of 12 people in the core region. Including Long Zai Tian, there were 13 of them, and every single one of them was an extremely powerful existence. Although only Long Zai Tian and the other 2 were rank 7 dominators among the 13 of them, the others were all rank 6 dominators. Moreover, their combat strength was not inferior to an ordinary rank 7 dominator. As for Long Zai Tian's battle strength, Long Yu really couldn't estimate it. Normally, when people appeared, they would have their own imposing manner. One could tell a thing or two from their imposing manner. However, Long Zai Tian's body didn't have any imposing manner at all. He was just like an ordinary hoodlum. Perhaps during battle, Long Zai Tian would display the imposing manner of a rank 7 dominator. In any case, up until now, Long Yu still didn't know what Long Zai Tian's strength was. Was he at the level of a peak rank 7 dominator, like Consort Yu? Or slightly weaker? Long Yu knew nothing about this. Suddenly, traces of fire began to appear in the images in front of them. This scene caused everyone present to become excited and agitated. The appearance of the fire was clearly the prelude to the appearance of the fire god race. The show is starting. A trace of fanaticism appeared in Long Zaition's eyes. Then, he finally stood up from his seat with an expression of anticipation. At this time, the others also looked at the images in the field with faces full of anticipation. Only at this time, these fellows' expressions were exactly the same. It wasn't like before when each of them had their own strange expressions. Long Yu also began to watch attentively. He discovered that in the silent void of the starry sky, traces of fire constantly appeared and began to decorate the void. It seemed that this was the prelude to the arrival of the fire god race's main force. Moreover, they didn't fly over. Instead, they directly teleported over from a faraway place. This situation made Long Yu a little surprised. The fire god race directly descended from a faraway place. It was reasonable to say that the news was extremely secretive. How could the Heavenly Dragon Legion know about it and come here to lay a trap in advance? This kind of thing wasn't something that Long Yu could know. After all, this was definitely related to the entire human race's intelligence system. It was absolutely impossible for this level of information to be leaked. Otherwise, the human race was likely to face a disadvantage in the war with the fire god race in the future. But now, since the Heavenly Dragon Legion had already set up the trap, Long Yu only needed to watch the show. When the time came, if a relatively powerful member of the fire god race died in that star field, Long Yu could seal the corpses of the powerful members of the fire god race in the ancient Dragon Bone Tower. If he could seal the corpse of a rank 7 dominator from the fire god race, it would be a great improvement for Long Yu. His frontal combat strength would increase by dozens of times. Of course, if Long Yu wanted to seal such a powerful fire god race corpse, he would still face many competitors. This was because many people in the Heavenly Dragon Legion wanted to collect the fire god race corpses. For example, that wretched short youth. Although he didn't know why he was collecting them, it was obvious that Long Yu would definitely not be able to snatch them away from him. No matter how one looked at it, these fire god race were prey that belonged to the Heavenly Dragon Army. At best, Long Yu was just a spectator. He didn't want to owe others favors, so he had to wait for the other party to pick first before picking the rest. He couldn't let the other party take all the fire god race corpses, right? Long Yu thought of this and continued to watch the scene. The traces of fire were the premonition that the Fire God Legion was about to arrive. At this time, the other party's arrival was inevitable. They would definitely appear in this place and fall into the Heavenly Dragon Legion's trap. At this moment, none of the other party's Fire God race had really arrived, so it was impossible for them to detect the oppressive aura in this place. No wonder this place is such an obvious trap. Ordinary people will bypass it when passing by, but it just happens to be effective against the other party's long-range teleportation. Long Yu was suddenly enlightened at this moment. He had to admire the human clan's battlefield legion or the Heavenly Dragon Legion's ability to obtain information. If they could know in advance that the Fire God Legion would arrive in this place, in this void star field, how could they collect information? In any case, Long Yu couldn't do it in any case. A good show was about to begin. The traces of fire in the void gradually enlarged, and then figures of the fire god race appeared out of thin air. Each of them was at least in the Great Dominator realm. This turned out to be a Great Dominator Legion. When the group of fire god race figures appeared, they descended into the void one after another. They seemed to have noticed that something was wrong. It seemed that after some urgent communication, they wanted to stop the people behind them from teleporting over. However, the teleportation had already begun, and they couldn't stop it at all. Therefore, all of them could only strive to escape in all directions as fast as possible. Because the other party's teleportation distance was too far, the people who teleported over could not send back the news here, causing a serious imbalance in the information on the Fire God race's side. They discovered that something was wrong and wanted to stop the follow-up troops from teleporting, but the follow-up troops didn't know the situation here at all. The teleportation continued, but every time the figures of the Fire God race arrived, They immediately noticed that something was wrong and wanted to teleport out of the void. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Dragon Legion had already expected such a move. Therefore, in this void, from the moment the traces of fire began to light up, a layer of space restriction had been activated. All space divine runes in this void were sealed and couldn't be used. None of the fire god race could escape. At least, they couldn't use space divine runes to teleport away. Therefore, they began to fly into the distance. More and more fire god race people were teleported over, and they gradually became stronger. Second Great Dominator Realm, Third Great Dominator Realm, even Fifth Great Dominator Realm, all the way to Seventh Great Dominator Realm. A total of about 3,000 people, the entire Great Dominator Legion, were gradually teleported over. All of them were teleported over in less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. The Fire God race Great Dominators who ran the furthest had not run out of the range of this Starfield trap. "It's about time, let's start." As Long Zetian laughed loudly, everyone saw that in the void, countless lightning bolts emerged without warning. The lightning bolts condensed from metal elemental power were like an inescapable net, completely covering the 3,000 Fire God race Great Dominators. The sudden attack of the trap caught the Fire God race Great Dominators off guard, but they didn't panic. They joined forces according to their small teams and began to work together to resist the bombardment of the lightning bolts. In particular, there were a few 7th Great Dominators who joined forces with the other Fire God race Great Dominators to build a tyrannical defensive barrier, so the lightning bolts didn't break it for a while. However, the other Fire God race suffered a lot. Most of the Fire God race Great Dominators were only 1st Great Dominators to 3rd Great Dominators. There were at least 2,000 of them, and there were no other powerful existences nearby. These Fire God race Great Dominators joined forces and set up a defensive array, but they couldn't resist for long. In just a few breaths, the entire Fire God race Great Dominator Legion had been killed or injured in the lightning bolts. This method of burying people on the ground is really amazing. Without shedding a drop of blood, they can wipe out the opponent's entire Great Dominator Legion. Long Yu was deeply shocked by this scene. One had to know that the Sky Dragon Legion was only a Great Dominator Legion. It was obviously much worse than a Great Dominator Legion. But now, the Fire God race Great Dominator Legion was directly defeated. Chapter 14:12. In Long Yu's line of sight, the Fire God race's great sovereign army that teleported over from an unknown distance and wanted to do something here was directly wiped out by the Heavenly Dragon Legion's ambush in advance. Even some of the Fire God race's great sovereign experts, after struggling for a while, were completely killed by the lightning condensed from the metal element's primordial power. In this empty starry sky, the 3,000 Fire God race's great sovereign experts were either dead or injured. Their corpses were scattered all over the place. They were all charred black under the bombardment of the thunder power. The flames on their bodies were completely extinguished, turning into a pile of charcoal. From the first Fire God race's great sovereign to the moment, all 3,000 Fire God race's great sovereign experts were killed in less than half an hour. During this time, Long Yu saw the Fire God race's great sovereign constantly struggling, but they couldn't escape the cage formed by the thunder trap. Done. Now it's time to harvest. Long Zetian snapped his fingers and then gave an order. Logistics team, go out and bring back all the Fire God race's corpses and everything on them. Start distributing the spoils of war. Yes, boss. Immediately, someone happily agreed and then ran out to inform the logistics team. Then, Long Zetian turned his head and glanced at Long Yu. He chuckled and said, "Brat, come with us. Everyone who sees will have a share." "How does your Heavenly Dragon Legion divide the things?" Long Yu asked. "Won't you know if you follow me?" Long Zetian laughed, then waved his hand, and the dozen or so people around him immediately stood up and followed him to divide the things. Long Yu didn't ask much and followed the crowd all the way. During this time, the wretched short young man walked with Long Yu and smiled at Long Yu. "I heard that you faced the alien demigods head-on. How did it feel? Faced head on? When Long Yu heard this, he suddenly felt uncomfortable and said awkwardly, "Do you want to try it too?" In fact, there are many such opportunities. There are many opportunities, but very few can survive. Sigh. The wretched-looking short young man sighed with a melancholy expression. If I can get a demigod corpse of an alien race one day, maybe I can also perceive something from it and step into the demigod realm. Hearing this, Long Yu had some ideas. There was no doubt that the Heavenly Dragon Legion was an extremely powerful legion. If they were recruited into the Void Galaxy, wouldn't that make the entire Void Galaxy a lot stronger? As for the decision of the Heavenly Dragon Legion, it was naturally in the hands of Long Zetian. However, it was impossible for Long Yu to bring this up to him. Only if Long Zetian admitted that he was his father would Long Yu consider telling Long Zetian something about the Void Milky Way. Otherwise, there would be no reason for Long Yu to persuade him to join. Besides, in fact, Long Yu didn't need the combat ability of the Heavenly Dragon Legion very much. After all, the Void Galaxy was still in a period of stable development and wouldn't encounter any battles with the alien races. For a legion like the Heavenly Dragon Legion, it was impossible for them to develop steadily. Only on the battlefield of the alien races could their strength be exerted to the fullest extent. As they moved forward, they kept teleporting and moving through the steel fortresses. Soon, they came to a huge square. In the center of the square, the charred corpses of the Fire God clan had been piled up like a mountain. Around the square, members of the Heavenly Dragon Legion were constantly gathering according to their squads. They were very orderly. About 8,000 people had arrived. The square was very spacious and could easily accommodate 8,000 people. It didn't seem crowded at all. In the center, many people were sorting out the corpses of the Fire God clan members, separating all kinds of cultivation resources from them. The battle weapons were put together with the battle weapons, the pills were put together with the pills, the fragments of the small worlds were put together with each other, and so on. The battle weapons and elixirs of the Fire God clan were useless to the human clan and the monster clan. However, the battle weapons and elixirs could be recast and decomposed into weapon refining materials. As for elixirs, they could also be decomposed into some special materials, which could be used by the human clan and the monster clan to refine their own elixirs. As for the fragments of the micro-worlds, they were useful. In every micro-world of the Fire God clan's Great Sovereign, there might be a lot of cultivation resources. These 3,000 Fire God clan's Great Sovereigns had 3,000 micro-world fragments, many of which were intact. This was definitely a great fortune. Even if the 3,000 people of the Heavenly Dragon Legion were to share it, everyone would still get a lot of things. The rest were the corpses of the Fire God clan's Great Sovereigns. Among them, there were 12 7th Phase Fire God clan's Great Sovereigns and 88 6th Phase Fire God clan's Great Sovereigns. Long Yu had his eyes on them. It would take a long time for these corpses to turn into dark creatures. However, once he succeeded, Long Yu's direct combat strength would increase by many times. At this moment of harvest, all the members of the Heavenly Dragon Legion revealed happy expressions. They waited expectantly for Long Zetian to distribute the spoils of war. All the battle weapons, the weapon refinement department will take them. All the elixirs, the pill refinement department will come and take them. All the Fire God clan's Great Sovereign's corpses, please register with me. The logistics officer will distribute them accordingly. Also, these micro-world fragments will be distributed according to the teams. The Spell Formation Department will get 12 7th Phase Sovereign's corpses and 88 6th Phase Sovereign's corpses. Hearing Long Zetian distribute these things, Long Yu felt that it was quite fair. This time, they were able to kill all 3,000 of the Fire God clan's Great Sovereign's corpses. Without a doubt, the Spell Formation was the greatest contributor. Since that was the case, it was normal for the Spell Formation Department to get the best rewards. How many cultivation resources would there be in the small worlds of the 7th and 6th Phase Sovereigns? It was hard to imagine. Moreover, there were 12 7th Phase Sovereigns and 88 6th Phase Sovereigns. Previously, Long Yu had heard that the Heavenly Dragon Legion's spell formation department only had a total of 300 people. Every single one of them had extremely high attainments in the field of spell formations. The Thundertrap formation had been laid out by them together. On average, every 3 people would get a 6th phase or 7th phase Sovereign Realm micro-world fragment to explore. Everything they obtained would belong to them. Such a harvest was enough to make everyone jealous. However, no one in the Heavenly Dragon Legion had any expressions of jealousy. They only had respect for the spell formation department. Clearly, this was what they deserved. Such a distribution was completely fair. If they had obtained the spoils from the battlefield, then the spell formation department wouldn't have gotten anything good. In this regard, it was completely fair within the Heavenly Dragon Legion. This gave Long Yu some inspiration. In the Void Galaxy, he could set up an independent spell formation department to study defensive spell formations, trap spell formations, and attack spell formations. Now that the Heaven Fire Doyen had joined the Void Galaxy, the Spirit Formation Department could be chosen by the Heaven Fire Doyen. After the selection, the Spirit Formation Department would be formed, and the people would be managed by the Heaven Fire Doyen himself. But this way, the Heaven Fire Doyen will be managing both the Weaponry Refinement Department and the Spirit Formation Department. It will be a little busy, Long Yu thought to himself. Then, he shook his head. There was nothing he could do about it. There was no one in the Void Galaxy who had reached a higher level in the field of spell formations like the Heaven Fire Doyen. For the time being, this was the only plan. In the future, Long Yu might meet a top genius who specialized in spell formations. He had to seize the opportunity to pull them into the Void Galaxy. Since Long Zai Tian wanted Long Yu to participate in the distribution of the spoils, Long Yu didn't stand on ceremony. He immediately registered with Long Zai Tian that he needed a few Fire God Race Sovereign's corpses. The higher their cultivation base, the better, and the more, the better. In short, what Long Yu meant was that as long as it was a Fire God Race Sovereign corpse that was above the 3rd phase, the rest could be given to Long Yu. If there wasn't any, then forget it. The corpses of the Fire God Race with lower cultivation were useless to Long Yu. Just the 3rd phase Great Dominator rank Fire God Race's elite patrol corpses. Long Yu already had over 200 of them. He didn't have the time to transform these corpses into darkness creatures. Therefore, he registered with Long Zai Tian to get as many high-level Fire God Race corpses as possible. He didn't have any requirements in terms of quantity. Long Yu didn't need too much, and he didn't lack much. It was better if he could get a share, but it didn't matter if he couldn't. Only with this mentality could he avoid being disappointed. After all, to the Heavenly Dragon Legion, Long Yu was just an outsider. When it was time to distribute the spoils, Long Yu didn't have the right to ask for too much. Just wait for the news. After Long Yu finished registering, Long Zai Tian smiled at him and nodded. We've finished our strategic deployment. It's about time to go back. 1 day later, your things will be distributed to you. 7 days later, we'll return to the vicinity of the battlefield fortress. Do you want to come with us, or? There's no rush to make this decision. Since the Fire God Race's Great Ruler Legion is settled, perhaps it's time to let some people meet you. Long Yu pondered for a moment. My mother, Bei Yu Yao, and Senior White Cloud are in my small world right now. If they hear that you're still alive, they'll definitely be very happy. I just don't know if you're willing to meet them. Hearing this, Long Zai Tian seemed to be a loss. Your mother is the one you're talking about, my wife? When we were on the 9 Nether Realms Heavenly Mandate Island. That's right. Long Yu was now sure that the Long Zai Tian in front of him was his father. It all depended on whether the other party admitted it or not. If he admitted it, that would be for the best. If he didn't, Long Yu couldn't do anything to him. If Long Zai Tian really lost his memory, would he remember something when he saw Bei Yu Yao, Feng Chang'e, and White Cloud? Chapter 14:13. Then let this commander go meet them, Yi Zichen said. Long Zai Tian waved his hand. Let's go, kid. Follow me to my room. The spoils of war were more or less distributed. Basically, everyone was happy. Every member of the Heavenly Dragon Corps got their share of the spoils of war. On Long Yu's side, the Fire God Race's bodies would take another day to be distributed. He was not in a hurry. Since Long Zai Tian wanted to see Bei Yu Yao and Bai Yunzong, Long Yu would meet with him first. Hopefully, Long Zai Tian would remember something. The main thing was Bei Yu Yao. Long Yu had been cultivating and did not have the time to accompany her. If Long Zai Tian remembered the past, he could naturally bring her along. Long Zai Tian turned and left alone, leaving the rest of the heavenly dragon corps in the square, allowing them to disperse. Long Yu followed Long Zai Tian, preparing to arrange their meeting. Long Zai Tian's room was not luxurious. Instead, it had a kind of iron-blooded style. The surrounding walls were surrounded by steel, and a somber atmosphere surrounded the entire room. The room wasn't big. After Long Yu came in, he saw a simple bed, a simple stone table, and a few simple stone stools. After all, this was the interior of a fortress used for battle, so it was impossible for there to be any palace-like things here. This place is not suitable for meeting. I'll go to your small world. Long Zai Tian returned to his room, glanced around, and then shook his head. He said to Long Yu, "Come in with me. You know, a pure person like me blushes when I see a woman. If I'm alone, I won't be able to speak." In any case, Long Yu didn't believe it at all. Long Yu had experienced Long Zai Tian's shamelessness. However, since he wanted to enter Long Yu's small world, it was for the best. Otherwise, Long Yu would have to bring the others out. Not only would it be troublesome, but it would also increase the psychological burden of the others. Now that Long Zai Tian took the initiative to see them, there was no doubt that he took care of their feelings. Long Yu felt that this was quite appropriate. "Then let's go." Long Yu nodded and raised his hand. The energy of the world enveloped Long Zai Tian and himself, and then he urged them to directly enter Long Yu's small world. The 9 underworld prison tablet appeared in Long Zai Tian's room, but there was no need to worry about safety. Who would dare to barge into the commander's room for no reason? However, just in case, Long Yu still asked little Sue to stand guard outside. If there was any special situation, Long Yu could immediately come out to deal with it. "Who should we meet first?" Long Yu asked Long Zai Tian. "White Cloud. You're talking about the leader of the Jintian clan, right?" Long Zai Tian squinted his eyes and said. When he arrived at Long Yu's pocket world, he saw an endless void. Not far away was the continent constructed by the Neo-Martial world. Since he wanted to meet other people, he naturally had to meet them one by one. This should have a better effect on recovering his memories. Ever since Long Yu left the Feng family for the Jintian clan, he knew about White Cloud. He also heard the story of his father, Long Zai Tian from White Cloud. White Cloud Track was slightly older than Long Zai Tian, but the two of them were very good friends. It was just that Long Zai Tian was expelled from the Great Tang Empire and was chased all the way to the heavenly prison lightning pool before completely disappearing. Now in Long Yu's pocket world, White Cloud had found his true love and was living a stable life. In the Northern Snow Empire, some people's status was superior to others. For example, White Cloud, Bei Yu Yao, and other people related to Long Yu. Ever since they came to the Neo-Martial world, they lived in the Northern Snow Empire, which was in the sky above the center of the Neo-Martial world. Although they had special privileges, they rarely appeared in front of others to exercise their privileges. Because of their relationship with Long Yu, they were considered distinguished guests in the Northern Snow Empire. Yu Hanqin gave them some special care, such as some free cultivation resources and so on. However, whether it was White Cloud or Bei Yu Yao, they all lived their own lives and rarely cared about other things. Long Yu first brought Long Zai Tian to the top of a barren mountain in the Northern Snow Empire. White Cloud Tracks had recently brought his beloved to live here. In fact, Long Yu also knew the woman beside White Cloud. She was the former leader of the Great Tang Empire's ice sect, Tang Qin. During the 7-clan martial competition, only the ice sect stood firmly on the side of the Jintian clan, establishing a friendly relationship between the two major sections. Later, White Cloud and Tang Qin developed a good impression of each other and naturally came together. Now, they lived in the wilderness of the Northern Snow Empire and lived a leisurely and carefree life. The two even had a young son, who was still in swaddling clothes and was far from growing up. In fact, even Tang Qin recognized Long Zai Tian, let alone White Cloud. However, Long Zai Tian might not necessarily recognize Tang Qin. After all, when Long Zai Tian was expelled from the Long family and the Great Tang Empire, Tang Qin was only a core disciple of the Ice Sect. There is a huge difference in status between the two. At this moment, White Cloud and Tang Qin were resting in the courtyard leisurely. Tang Qin held her baby in her arms and chatted happily with White Cloud and Long Zai Tian. In the distance, Long Yu and Long Zaiyan's figures slowly appeared on the horizon. Then, they quickly flew over. Bai Yunzong and Tang Qin immediately saw them. Who is it? White Cloud and Tang Qin were obviously a little surprised. No one had ever come looking for them since they had lived in this place. Apart from Bai Yuyao, who would occasionally come over, no one else had. Now, the two figures in the sky were clearly not Bai Yuyao. Furthermore, the two figures seemed to be heading for this mountain peak. Basically, there was no other possibility that they were here for White Cloud. Soon, Long Yu and Long Zai Tian gradually approached the mountain peak. When White Cloud and Tang Qin saw the figures of the two figures, they immediately looked extremely surprised. I was wondering who it was. It's actually Long Yu and Long Zai Tian. He found his father? White Cloud's face was full of surprise at first. Then it was full of surprise. For him, if there was any regret in this life, it would be that his brother Long Zai Tian's fate was unknown. Back then, when Long Zai Tian was expelled from the Tang Empire, he was unable to stop it. This was the pain of his life. But now, Long Zai Tian, who he could not forget, suddenly appeared in front of him. Tang Qin also recognized Long Zai Tian. She stood up with her baby in her arms and looked up at the two figures in the sky. Her pretty face also showed surprise. Isn't that? Long Zai Tian? Oh my God! Tang Qin couldn't help but exclaim. She had seen Long Zai Tian from afar and knew very well that Long Zai Tian was a legendary hero of the Tang Empire. Later, she brought the entire Ice Sect and followed Long Yu to the divine battle world outside of Heavenly Mandate Island. She knew that Long Zai Tian was being hunted down and trapped in the heavenly prison Thunderpool. There was no news for so long. She never thought that there would be a day when Long Zai Tian would return. However, she couldn't see how much cultivation Long Zai Tian had now. After all, Long Zai Tian's aura was relatively reserved. Moreover, the gap between her and Long Zai Tian was too big. White Cloud and Tang Qin both stood up and looked in the direction where Long Yu and Long Zai Tian were flying from. Long Yu saw White Cloud and Tang Qin from afar and began to introduce them to Long Zai Tian. This is White Cloud. When you were in the Tang Empire, you were the best of brothers. He was the clan leader of the Tang Empire's Jintian clan. Although White Cloud and Tang Qin didn't care much about improving their martial arts realm, they also had the cultivation of the King's Path secret realm. Among them, White Cloud was in the late stage of the King's realm, and Tang Qin was in the early stage of the King's realm. In the current Northern Snow Empire, this cultivation was nothing. However, they didn't pursue fame and wealth. This cultivation was absolutely enough to protect themselves. Even if there was any powerful existence that wanted to harm them, they had the communication talisman that Yuan Xin had given them. They could inform the nearby Northern Snow Empire Army Corps at any time. Boy, you're doing something wrong. Long Zai Tian looked at White Cloud and Tang Qin and immediately knocked the back of Long Yu's head. You know that he is your father's brother. Why didn't you help him? Why is he only in the King's Path secret realm? Since you haven't thought about it, don't try to take advantage of me. If you want to be my father, you should at least take care of my mother. Long Yu had a headache over Long Zai Tian's personality, but he still explained, also, it's not that I don't want to help White Cloud and Senior Tang Qin. They stayed here willingly. The rest of the people I brought with me are currently training in the foreign tribes battlefield. They're all trying to break through to the sovereign's secret realm. And so that's how it is. Long Zai Tian narrowed his eyes and looked at White Cloud from afar. However, he couldn't remember anything. However, there were some things that couldn't be remembered just by looking at him once. Let's talk to him later. Let's see if I can remember anything. Long Zai Tian laughed heartily and increased his speed. Soon, he landed in front of the houses on the mountain peak and walked towards White Cloud. When the two met, there was no need for Long Yu to introduce them. After all, they both knew who the other party was. However, Long Yu didn't expect that Long Zai Tian would still be able to chat with White Cloud even after losing his memories. The two entered the house and prepared to talk. Long Yu could only stay outside with Tang Qin and White Cloud. How old is the baby? 6 months. Congratulations, congratulations. Long Yu chatted with Tang Qin, and they soon talked about the Jintian clan and the Ice Gate. It turned out that these two sects had taken root in the capital of the Northern Snow Empire. The sect leaders of these two sects were people that Long Yu didn't know. They were the rising stars of their sections. Chapter 1414. At that time, Long Yu had also thought about bringing the Ice Sect, the Jintian clan, and Shu Chan's group of people to Beyond Heaven World. But when he had this idea, he was already in the outer galaxy of the Demon Clan's territory. Obviously, they could not adapt to life in the outer galaxy. At the very least, their martial arts realm was not high enough, so it was impossible for them to complete the training tasks in the outer galaxy. Therefore, they were not qualified to stay in the outer galaxy. Therefore, Long Yu could only let them continue to stay in his micro-world like this. According to the selection system of Long Yu's micro-world, once a cultivator with enough talent appeared, the 5 emperors would gather them so that Long Yu could take them out when it was convenient. For the time being, the Ice Sect and the Jintian clan did not have disciples who had reached this level. Therefore, they were still developing themselves in the imperial capital of the Northern Snow Empire. After waiting for a long time, Long Yu did not see White Cloud and Long Zaiyan come out of the house. As the sun set, Tang Qin smiled at Long Yu and said, "I will go into the house to make some food. I don't know how long they're going to talk. Let's not stand outside." "Okay." Long Yu nodded. He followed Tang Qin into the house and found that the decorations were very simple and refreshing. This kind of life was somewhat enviable. Unfortunately, Long Yu was not destined to get used to this kind of peaceful life. After entering the house, he did not disturb Long Zaiqian and White Cloud, nor did he follow Tang Qin all the way. Instead, he followed Tang Qin to an empty room. This room was usually used by the couple to cultivate. In this place, Long Yu quietly cultivated. He had experienced the previous battle and understood what he was currently lacking in. Therefore, he wanted to take advantage of this time to improve. The area he wanted to improve was, of course, the secret martial arts technique, the Devil Dust Heart. Previously, he had cultivated the Demon Dust Heart to the 2nd level, and the speed at which his body was reconstructed was not slow. However, in actual combat, he still could not keep up with the rhythm. Long Yu had fought against a 3rd-stage Sovereign Realm Fire God Race's elite patrol team, and he had almost been killed in a desperate melee. At that time, if Long Yu's Devil Dust Heart realm was higher, it would have been much easier to fight. In any case, he had already accumulated more than 4 months' worth of Heaven and Earth spiritual chi. This amount of Heaven and Earth spiritual chi was definitely enough for him to upgrade his Devil Dust Heart martial arts secret technique by at least 3 levels. As long as there was enough Heaven and Earth spiritual energy or creation power, it was undoubtedly very fast to upgrade the level of martial arts secret techniques. Long Yu's pocket dimension had already stored enough Heaven and Earth spiritual chi. Now that he was in the pocket dimension, he could casually use his world power to absorb the Heaven and Earth spiritual chi stored in other parts of the pocket dimension into his body. On the right side of Long Yu's chest, the Devil Dust Heart was beating slowly. The blood vessels on it were connected to every part of Long Yu's body. The moment any part of his body was injured, it would immediately recover. At this time, Long Yu was gathering the Heaven and Earth spiritual energy towards the Devil Dust Heart. According to the cultivation method of the Devil Dust Heart, he began to condense this 2nd heart. After Long Yu's pocket dimension merged with the heavenly spirit source, the recovery rate of Heaven and Earth spiritual energy became extremely fast. Not only could Long Yu provide 10 times the amount of Heaven and Earth spiritual energy to the Bone race and Vestigial race, but he had also accumulated a large amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy. According to the calculation of the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy, the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy that Long Yu had accumulated was equivalent to at least 1,000 primordial gray divine pills. 1,000 primordial gray divine pills. How much resources was that? This was the biggest difference between a cultivator with a pocket dimension and other cultivators. Once one stepped into the ruler's secret realm and condensed a pocket dimension, the entire pocket dimension would be equivalent to an endless supply of heaven and earth spiritual energy to the cultivator, saving a lot of resources. A single pocket dimension could support the hundreds of billions of cultivators in the new martial world. From this, it could be seen that the difference between stepping into the ruler's secret realm and not entering the ruler's secret realm was too great. Now, that Long Yu had so much heaven and earth spiritual energy, he was wondering if he should go take a look at the bone race and vestigial race. Perhaps Yu Wufang wanted to exchange more unbounded grade martial skill jade slips for heaven and earth spiritual energy. In any case, upgrading the devil dust heart was the most important thing for Long Yu. He gathered all the spiritual chi of heaven and earth towards the devil dust heart in an endless stream, continuously increasing the strength of the devil dust heart. At this rate, it would not take more than a few hours to raise the level of this martial arts secret technique. A full day and night passed. The heaven and earth spiritual chi that Long Yu had accumulated for so many months was quickly condensed into the devil dust heart. This secret martial art technique, the devil dust heart, was directly upgraded to the 5th level. Upgrading the devil dust heart is indeed much more difficult than upgrading the pure world physique and balance control. Looks like I'll have to accumulate heaven and earth spiritual energy for another 2 months before I can upgrade the devil dust heart to the 6th level. Long Yu sighed with emotion. The heaven and earth spiritual energy was still plentiful. As long as he upgraded the devil dust heart to the 6th level, he wouldn't need any more heaven and earth spiritual energy. At that time, he could pour even more heaven and earth spiritual energy into the new martial world, increasing the cultivation speed of the billions of cultivators in the new martial world. After all, it was almost time to create more talents for the Void Galaxy. Without the heavenly spirit source to increase the rate of heaven and earth spiritual energy production in Long Yu's pocket dimension by 10 times, it would be too difficult to achieve this. But now, Long Yu had easily upgraded the devil dust heart to the 5th level. It could be said that the recovery speed of the heaven and earth spiritual energy in Long Yu's pocket dimension was not inferior to that of some 3rd stage rulers. A day and night passed, and no one came to disturb him. When he used up all the heaven and earth spiritual energy in his body, he paid attention to his surroundings and discovered that White Cloud and Long Zai Tian were drinking and chatting in the courtyard outside the house. Tang Xin was pouring wine at the side. From the looks of it, they seemed to be chatting happily. I wonder if he has recovered some of his memories? Long Yu thought to himself, but he didn't disturb them. With a thought, he disappeared from the house. Since Long Zai Tian and White Cloud hadn't finished their discussion, he had to do something else first. For example, he had to go see Yu Wufang of the Bone Race. The Bone Race now had 10 times the heaven and earth spiritual energy supply every month, so their lives were naturally much more comfortable. Many of the younger generation of the Bone Race could gradually cultivate and improve their martial path realms. This gave the 300,000 living beings of the Bone Race the motivation to work hard. When Long Yu appeared in front of Yu Wufang again, Yu Wufang was obviously waiting for Long Yu. When he saw Long Yu, Yu Wufang immediately came up to him, but when he saw that Long Yu didn't have the Nether Void Dragon Dagger with him, he couldn't help but feel vexed. They couldn't communicate like this. However, Long Yu smiled and raised his hand to release the ancient Dragonbone Tower. Now that he and ancient Dragonbone Tower had reached an unparalleled level, their minds were connected, and the ancient Dragonbone Tower was the consciousness of the battle weapon, so it could completely receive Yu Wufang's divine sense. In other words, as long as they had an unparalleled battle weapon, humans or Yao cultivators could communicate with the other races. What do you want? Just say it. Long Yu said directly to Yu Wufang through the ancient dragon bone tower. Yu Wufang's divine sense quickly passed into Long Yu's mind through the ancient dragon bone tower. My lord, the bone race has been living much better than before. Thank you for your generosity. That's what you've earned. We're just trading on equal terms. Long Yu smiled and replied, as I said before, as long as you provide me with an unbounded martial skill jade slip, I can give you 10 times the heaven and earth spiritual energy for a month. My lord, since it's a trade, it should be fair. At the very least, it should be relatively fair. Yu Wufang thought for a moment, then sent a divine sense message to Long Yu. Heaven and earth spirit energy is a resource that can be constantly restored to you, my lord. But the unbounded martial skill is just one less to us. A monthly transaction is far too much of a loss for the bone race and the remnant races. Then what do you want? Long Yu squinted his eyes and asked back. An unbounded martial skill jade slip for 3 times the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy and forever. Yu Wufang straightforwardly stated his demand. He wasn't afraid of Long Yu getting angry. In any case, they had the unbounded martial skill jade slips, which could guarantee their safety. What they needed to do now was negotiate with Long Yu. 3 times the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy? That's not a good deal for me. If that's the deal, I'd rather not have the unbounded martial skill. Long Yu chuckled. He did not agree to the other party's conditions. He did not even think about bargaining. Giving the bone race 10 times the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy meant that Long Yu would need to consume 10% of the heaven and earth spiritual energy. Right now, he needed to consume 20% of the heaven and earth spiritual energy in the new martial world, and he planned to increase the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy in the new martial world. Without a doubt, compared to the unbounded martial skill, the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy in the new martial world was much more important. After all, the 2 unbounded martial skills that Long Yu had obtained hadn't even reached the transformation realm yet. Then, how about 2.5 times? Yu Wufang thought for a moment, then proposed again. Our bone race has experts who have entered the sovereign secret realm before. We also know the natural recovery rate of heaven and earth spiritual energy. Therefore, if you give us 3 to 5 times the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy, it shouldn't affect the Lord too much. If Long Yu didn't have the heavenly spirit source, then the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy wouldn't be small. But now that he had the heavenly spirit source, 3 to 5 times the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy wouldn't affect him too much. However, Long Yu couldn't give the other party the impression that heaven and earth spiritual energy was cheap. 2 times. That's the most I can accept. Also, I'll only accept 3 transactions. 3 unbounded martial skill jade slips for 6 times the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy. If that's the case, I can still consider it. Long Yu directly stated his bottom line. Chapter 14-15. Hearing Long Yu's conditions, Yu Wufang began to consider it. 6 times the amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy would give the bone race many opportunities to develop. At the very least, it would allow the majority of their members to smoothly grow. The members of the bone race, as long as they smoothly grew to adulthood, would basically have the cultivation of a 2-star emperor to a 3-star emperor. And for them to grow, they needed enough heaven and earth spiritual energy. As for the next level, what they needed was not just heaven and earth spiritual energy. Unless they obtained a creation item, they could only rely on their own hard work and luck. If they had an epiphany, it was also possible to rise to another level. But the difficulty of epiphany was too high. This kind of situation was too rare. Back in the ancient ruins of the galaxy, not a single person in the bone race had been able to have an epiphany. At that time, they could occasionally find 1 or 2 creation items and use them to increase the cultivation of the top geniuses of the clan. For example, Yu Wufang was currently at the level of a 5-star emperor. After coming to Long Yu's small world, Yu Wufang had also exploded and increased his cultivation a bit. From this, it could be seen that Yu Wufang's martial talent was indeed very strong. If he had enough cultivation resources, Yu Wufang might not be any worse than Consort Yu, Frost, or Imperial Wind. After all, Yu Wufang was the most talented person in the bone race. Although there were only 300,000 members of the bone race left, in reality, there were still many geniuses. When the bone race was destroyed, those who had the qualifications to be protected and passed on were all of the most outstanding bloodlines of the clan. Now, in the bone race, every ordinary member of the bone race, if compared to the human race and the monster race, their martial talent would definitely be among the best. At the very least, they would be able to reach the level of Black Knife and Yi Ziwei. Because of this, Long Yu had to keep a close eye on these fellows. Otherwise, if he wasn't careful and didn't control them, it was very likely that they would bring great trouble to the human race and the monster race. Thinking of this, Long Yu felt that it was a pity. If they weren't of the same race, their hearts would surely be different. Otherwise, he would have absorbed these 300,000 bone race clansmen into the forces of the Void Galaxy. With some training, the overall combat power of these 300,000 bone race clansmen could be 100 times that of the Heavenly Dragon Army. It was a pity that Long Yu couldn't control such a powerful force at the moment. Once the other party gained power, they would definitely pose a threat to the Void Galaxy. If there were any accidents, Long Yu couldn't afford the loss. So at least for now, he couldn't put this plan into practice. Yu Wufang thought for a moment. It was difficult to make a decision. Fortunately, the entire bone race was under Yu Wufang's control, so he was the only one making the decision. If there were more decision-makers, it would be even more difficult to make a decision. Long Yu was not in a hurry. He was carefully observing the 300,000 members of the bone race. Most of the members of the bone race were ordinary bone warriors with more than 100 bones. These members of the bone race accounted for 99% of the 300,000 bone race clansmen. Only the remaining 1%, about 3,000, were royal members of the bone race like Yu Wufang. According to the history books, the royal members of the bone race were composed of 460 bones. But now, the royal members of the bone race had more than 460 bones. Among them, Yu Wufang had 578 bones. He was one of the strongest in this group of bone race clansmen. Besides him, there were 3 other experts, each with more than 700 bones. Long Yu now roughly understood why the number of bones each of them had was different from the number recorded in the history books. In the history books, the number of ordinary bone warriors, royal members, and royal members of the bone race was fixed. 103, 460, and 3,600. But now, their numbers were greater than what was recorded in the history books. This was because of hybridization. In the past, the social hierarchy of the bone race was strict. It was absolutely impossible for ordinary bone warriors to have children with the royal members of the bone race. But after the bone race suffered a devastating blow, in order to preserve the continuation of the bone race, ordinary bone warriors, royal members, and royal members of the bone race began to marry each other. Thus, different members of the bone race with different numbers of bones were born. Among the 300,000 bone race clansmen led by Yu Wufang, although Yu Wufang did not have the highest number of bones, he had the purest royal bloodline. As his martial arts realm increased, the number of bones in his body could also increase. This was because of his bloodline. But the 3 geniuses of the bone race with more than 700 bones were not very pure. As their martial arts realm increased, the number of bones in their body was limited. Roughly speaking, as long as Yu Wufang entered the ruler's secret realm, he could surpass them and become the strongest expert of the bone race. Of course, right now, the 3 geniuses of the bone race with more than 700 bones were only at the level of the 3-star emperor or 4-star emperor. Compared to Yu Wufang, their strength was much lower. Long Yu's understanding of the bone race was much deeper than before. After all, they had been in his little world for a long time. There were some things that Long Yu had been secretly paying attention to. Of course, Long Yu knew everything that was going on in his little world. He had been thinking of ways to make these bone race clansmen work for him. Unfortunately, he had not come up with a better way. There was always a lot of risk involved, so he could not make up his mind. Since that was the case, he would let them stay in the little world for now. When Long Yu thought a way to deal with them, he would come back and deal with them. Before that, he could dig out the unending rank martial skill jade slips they had. This would be very useful to Long Yu and the forces in the galaxy. Just the two moves that Long Yu had obtained, Fighting Mad Celestial Body and Limitless Grasp, had greatly increased Long Yu's combat strength. In fact, Fighting Mad Celestial Body had become his greatest asset in fighting those above his level. While Long Yu was thinking about this problem, Yu Wufang was also thinking about it. About an hour later, Yu Wufang finally made up his mind. He sent a divine will transmission to Long Yu. In that case, we'll do as you said, my lord. We'll permanently provide 6 times the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and exchange it for 3 unbounded martial skill jade slips. According to the usual practice, we will be the ones to choose the jade slips. All right, it's settled then. Long Yu narrowed his eyes and nodded in agreement. In fact, for Long Yu, who possessed the heavenly spirit source, it wasn't difficult for him to provide the 300,000 bone race clansmen with 6 times the amount of world energy. But 3 unending rank martial skill jade slips were still very useful to Long Yu. In terms of value, Long Yu definitely had a huge advantage. If this was the case in the outside world, who knew how many people would fight for it? Unfortunately, Long Yu couldn't just let the bone race clansmen go. So Long Yu was the only one who could take advantage of this. The reason Long Yu didn't want to trade more was because he wanted to take it slow. After all, unending rank martial skill jade slips weren't cabbages. Long Yu didn't want to squeeze too much out of the bone race clansmen. The fewer unending rank martial skill jade slips they had, the more likely things would go wrong. Long Yu was well aware of that. After all, they had to give Long Yu an unending rank martial skill jade slip every year. If they had too few jade slips, they would definitely panic and try to find a way out. Who knew when they might cause trouble for Long Yu? That wouldn't be good. Therefore, 3 unending rank martial skill jade slips should be within their acceptable range and would satisfy Long Yu's current needs. It was a feasible deal. Now that the two sides had reached an agreement, it was time to deliver the jade slips. Yu Wufang had long since prepared the 3 unbounded martial skill jade slips, and now he handed them over to Long Yu. Long Yu drew on the power of his world, causing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to gather around him. It didn't take long for the 6 times the amount of heaven and earth spirit energy to arrive. Long Yu didn't waste any time. Once the transaction was complete, he took the unending rank martial skill jade slips and left. Next, the bone race clansmen erupted in cheers. Ever since they had been given 10 times the amount of heaven and earth spirit energy, their days had been pretty good. They all cherished those days. Now that they had received 6 times the amount of heaven and earth spirit energy, they knew that their days would only get better and better in the future. Although they were still imprisoned in Long Yu's minor world, at least nothing had happened here. It was a relatively safe place. If they left this minor world, they would be in true danger. There would be outsiders everywhere, and no one would be able to protect them. Now, there was Long Yu who could protect their existence, so that they could at least continue to live. Long Yu's figure flickered. Enveloped by world energy, he returned to the minor world. Behind Tang Qin and Traceless White Cloud's home, he reappeared in the cultivation room. At this time, Traceless White Cloud and Long Zaiyan were still happily chatting. Outside in the courtyard, Tang Qin had also joined in on the conversation. Long Yu didn't care what they were talking about. In any case, he just wanted to know the result. If Long Zaiyan couldn't recover his memories, then everything would be for naught. In comparison, he was more concerned about the 3 unending rank martial skill jade slips he had obtained. After all, they were closely related to him. 2 Yao martial skills and 1 universal martial skill. Long Yu took a look and was immediately disappointed. Including the universal martial skill, none of these 3 martial skills were of any use to him. Of the 2 Yao martial skills, 1 was offensive and 1 was defensive. Giving them to Red Oriole and the others wouldn't be a bad idea, but they were useless to Long Yu. He wasn't a Yao, so he couldn't cultivate their racial martial skills. As for the general martial skill, it was a body technique martial skill, and at the current stage, Long Yu did not really need it. After all, he had the Void Nether Dragon Blade, and could teleport long distances. As for short distances, he also had the Berserk Divine Walk movement technique. Chapter 14:16. Although they were of no use to Long Yu, they were very useful to other people in the Void Galaxy. First of all, one of the demon martial skills was a common control martial skill of the demon race. If Red Oriole practiced it, she could use it with Long Yu's boundless grasp to make her enemies suffer. There was also an offensive martial technique that could be used with Ice-type divine characters. As a high-grade, unbounded martial technique, its attack power would definitely not be disappointing. Furthermore, Ice-type divine characters usually had some sort of control effect. There aren't many demon cultivators with Ice attribute in the Void Galaxy, Long Yu thought to himself. He thought of the pair of new students in the Demigod Institute, namely Tian Qingxue, one of the twin demons. In the Demigod Institute, the number of demon cultivators was about the same as that of humans. Among those who had participated in Long Yu's auction of the Ice Essence, only Tian Qingxue was a demon cultivator. This Ice-attributed fiend race martial technique could be sold at a suitable time. That way, Long Yu wouldn't have a copy of it, because the martial skill Jade Slips could only be copied after the cultivator had practiced them to a certain level. If he sold it now, he would have to sell it completely. It would be a pity. Long Yu thought for a moment. Perhaps he could find someone in the Void Galaxy to practice this martial skill first, and then sell it. That would be better. There were still 2 months to go before the new batch of Divine Enlightenment wine would be on the shelves in the Demigods College. During this period, Long Yu probably wouldn't be able to earn enough battlefield credits. Therefore, selling a high-grade, unbounded martial skill was also a means to him. In any case, Long Yu would definitely make a huge profit. While he was thinking, Long Zai Tian suddenly ran in from outside. "Kid, let's go. There's an accident outside." Long Zai Tian's face turned a little serious, and he called out to Long Yu. "Okay." Long Yu didn't ask what had happened. He would know once he left this place. On the other hand, the Nether Dragon Blade didn't react at all. It seemed that Long Zai Tian and the Heavenly Dragon Army members had some special communication method. It seemed that Long Zai Tian had already bid farewell to Bai Yunzong. Long Yu waved at Bai Yunzong and Tang Qin before using the power of the world to wrap Long Zai Tian and return to the outside of the small world. The scene before their eyes changed, and very quickly, Long Yu and Long Zai Tian returned to Long Zai Tian's room. "Little Sue, is everything all right?" Long Yu winked at Little Void. The Void Nether Dragon Blade flew to Long Yu's side and sent a telepathic message. "Something seems to have happened outside, but it shouldn't be a big problem. It's not dangerous, but it seems to be a bit troublesome." "Yes." Long Yu nodded his head and asked Long Zai Tian, "How is it?" "Did you recall any memories?" "No. Bai Yunzong told me a lot of things in the past, but unfortunately, I can't remember anything. Let's talk about this later. There are still people outside who need to be rescued." As Long Zai Tian spoke, he prepared to run out. Long Yu naturally followed him. After all, they were still in the depths of the battlefield of the alien race. It was normal to encounter some accidents, but he didn't know what had happened. Very soon, Long Yu followed Long Zai Tian to the command center area. Then he looked outside and saw a familiar team being surrounded and attacked by a large group of Fire God Race soldiers. That familiar team happened to be the army of rulers that Long Yu had just rescued from the encirclement of the Fire God Race. Now, there were about 5,000 people left. It seemed that in just a short period of time, nearly 1,000 people had been besieged and killed by the army of the Fire God Race. What's going on with this army of rulers? Why are they always being besieged by the army of the Fire God Race? Long Yu's head was full of cold sweat. Wasn't the luck of this army of rulers too bad? He had just rescued them from encirclement, and it didn't take long for them to be surrounded again. This luck? Or was this army of rulers targeted by the people of the Fire God Race? That was the only possibility. As for traitors, they wouldn't appear in the war against the mutated race because the difference between the races was too great. Now, it depended on what the Sky Dragon army could do. that definitely had to rescue them, but the key was how to rescue them. Directly from the front? Anyway, the current matter had nothing to do with Long Yu. He just needed to watch here, collect information, and see the overall strength of the Fire God Race army. Long Zaition quickly issued one order after another. The most important thing was to collect information. Only by knowing oneself and the enemy could one win every battle. The reason why the Sky Dragon army could have such a prestigious reputation was inseparable from its strong ability to collect information. In the Sky Dragon army, the intelligence team immediately began to act. Of course, Long Yu couldn't see the process of this group of people's actions. He only knew that after a while, Long Zaition had obtained most of the information he wanted to know. Right now, the steel fortress that Long Yu was hiding in was also completely hidden in the nearby void. The encirclement of a human race's ruler army and the surrounding Fire God Race army didn't know that there was such a steel fortress eyeing them covetously. The Sky Dragon army had enough time to ensure their own safety and choose how to rescue the human ruler army. This Fire God Race's Juggernaut Legion has 4 7th Phase Juggernauts, 6 6th Phase Juggernauts, and 24 5th Phase Juggernauts. The rest are all 4th Phase Juggernauts and below. There are a total of 8,000 people, and 7,500 of them haven't reached the level of Juggernaut. This is a standard Fire God Race Juggernaut Legion. Long Zaition announced the information obtained by the intelligence team and revealed a smile. Since it's like this, our Sky Dragon army is going to fight again. All combat teams get ready to move and split up to carry out a sneak attack. Strive to get rid of the Fire God Race commander and deputy commander as fast as possible. Operation Decapitation begin. It could be seen that this definitely wasn't the first time the Sky Dragon army had done something like this. With a steel fortress that could turn invisible, it would be easy for him to carry out sneak attacks. How'd he get this steel fortress? In any case, it had something to do with Long Zaition. The role of this iron fortress on the battlefield of the other races was absolutely comparable to those of the human race's official battlefield fortresses. In fact, it was even better. After all, the invisible steel fortress could be used in many places and produce miraculous effects. Long Yu just needed to watch the show. In the void in front of them, the Fire God Race ruler army was confident of victory. They constantly attacked the surrounded human ruler army. Both sides fought back and forth, and fire attribute divine runes filled the entire battlefield. At every moment, there were creatures dying in the battle. Although he was very far away, Long Yu could still feel the somber atmosphere of the battlefield. Every member of the human ruler army was using all their strength to block the Fire God Race's attack. However, it was really difficult to completely block the Fire God Race's attack with just their defense alone. Countless flames came from all directions. In the human ruler army, the 7th Phase Great Ruler Army commanders all joined the battle. They constantly charged in different directions. Every time they charged, they could use the tyrannical Berserk Divine runes to blow up several Fire God Race rulers. However, after blowing up a few, 4th and 5th Phase Great Ruler Realm Fire God Race members immediately joined forces to attack him. Under the joint attack of the other party, the human commander had no choice but to retreat and try to break out of the encirclement in other directions. However, the Fire God Race's encirclement was extremely tight. In every direction, there were 4th and 5th Phase Great Ruler Realm squad leaders and captains intercepting them. Even a human commander couldn't directly break out of the encirclement. Moreover, once the human commander and other human experts showed signs of breaking out of the encirclement, the 7th Phase Great Ruler Realm experts in the Fire God Race's army would immediately take action. This was completely an airtight cage that enveloped the entire human army. There was no chance of escape. And at this time, the Sky Dragon Legion arrived. In the Sky Dragon Legion, there were several teams in charge of the beheading operation. Although these teams didn't have very strong existences, with the strongest being at the 5th Phase Great Ruler Realm. When they joined forces, they could kill a 7th Phase Great Ruler Realm expert from the Fire God Race. Long Yu carefully observed the battlefield. Soon, he finally saw the figures of the beheading operation team. When Long Yu saw the figures of this team, the Fire God race's ruler army naturally saw them as well. However, it was too late for them to react. In the Sky Dragon Legion, each of these beheading operation teams had a divine grade absolute beginning treasure. Moreover, each of them had awakened a divine grade absolute beginning treasure to the 6th level or above. In other words, the actual combat strength of each of these teams was comparable to Red Oriole's level. Each beheading operation team had 7 to 12 people. The team with fewer people was responsible for the 6th phase Great Ruler Realm Fire God Race leader, while the team with more people was responsible for the 7th phase Great Ruler Realm Fire God Race army commander. With the division of labor, each team's responsibility was extremely clear. In total, there were 20 beheading operation teams with a total of about 200 people. Without a doubt, these 200 people were the Sky Dragon Legion's elite teams. Many strategic missions relied on them to complete. For example, the beheading operation right now, facing the 8,000-strong Fire God race's Ruler Realm army head-on, was definitely not a good choice. Even if they could win that way, the Sky Dragon Legion would suffer great losses. And by carrying out the beheading operation first, they could avoid large-scale casualties on their side. It could be said that the 20 beheading operation teams were the vanguard of the Sky Dragon Legion against the other foreign races. They were the absolute main force. Basically, half of the Sky Dragon Legion's experts were concentrated in these beheading operation teams. Chapter 14-17. Once the Heaven Dragon Legion's execution team appeared, the entire situation on the battlefield changed. When the 7th and 6th phase dominators of the Fire God race were entangled, the experts of the human race's ruler legions that were originally surrounded began to break out of the encirclement. Attacked from both inside and outside, the Fire God race's ruler legions immediately fell into chaos. This execution team is not bad. Long Yu's eyes lit up. This kind of team that specialized in dealing with opponents with high combat strength should be formed among the Void Galaxy's factions. On the battlefield, this kind of team seemed to be able to create a lot of value. It was much more valuable than letting these experts with high combat strength lead other teams. In Long Yu's eyes, many of the execution teams had already stalled the experts of the Fire God race with high battle prowess and completely suppressed them the moment they took action. Even if there were ordinary Fire God race warriors coming over to harass them, they would not be able to rescue their team leaders. Every member of the execution team had a divine absolute beginning rank awakened to the 6th phase and above. They also cultivated a unified martial path secret technique. The effect of this martial path secret technique seemed to be able to increase the power of a divine absolute beginning rank. This was the unified configuration of the execution team in the Heaven Dragon Legion. Martial Path secret techniques, combined with divine absolute beginning rank, allowed them to have unparalleled offensive power. It had a powerful effect when dealing with enemies with high combat strength suddenly. In almost an instant, 2 6th phase dominators of the Fire God race were directly killed. Their corpses were taken away by the execution team to prevent them from being lost in the chaos. There were many good things in the corpses and small world remains of the 6th phase dominators of the Fire God race that could not be wasted. Moreover, it was related to the problem of more convenient distribution after the battle. A mere quarter of an hour later, Long Yu discovered that the beheading teams had practically finished off their opponents. Among the Fire God race's dominator legions, the only one left was the strongest commander, who was at the 7th and 6th phase Great Dominators. There were a total of 24 execution team members dealing with this commander. However, they were unable to kill him in a short time. After all, the difference in combat strength between the two sides was too great. However, at this time, the commander and deputy commander of the human ruler's army finally broke through the encirclement and headed straight for their direction. The 3 commanders and vice commanders of the human ruler's army were all 7th phase rulers. As soon as they entered the battlefield, they immediately suppressed the enemy's commander. Together with the 24 members of the decapitation operation, they immediately heavily injured the enemy with the speed of lightning. The other Fire God tribe cultivators around the Fire God tribe's chief legion commander couldn't help at all. In a battle of this level, only the strong could affect the battlefield. The Fire God race's legion commander's entire body turned into flames. He actually underwent a nirvana, and all the serious injuries on his body were immediately healed. However, he didn't dare to continue fighting. He immediately turned around and wanted to activate spatial divine symbols to escape. It was very clear that since these execution teams had suddenly appeared nearby, there would definitely be other powerhouses hiding. If it didn't leave now, it would be too late. It would lose its life here. However, it was too late for it to run now. Intercept Team Long Zai Tian gave the order from the central command area of the Steel Fortress. Immediately, another Sky Dragon Legion's branch team moved. This intercept team didn't have many people, only a mere 7. However, each of them had a very powerful technique, which was spatial interception. The technique they had was similar to the absolute space domain that Long Yu had displayed with the ancient Dragonbone Tower. It could seal off all spatial divine symbols in the area, making it impossible for anyone to use them. Thus, it had the effect of intercepting the enemy and preventing them from escaping. The surrounding space was almost immediately completely sealed. No one could use spatial divine symbols in the area, including the Fire God race's 7th phase ruler's chief legion commander. The Fire God race's chief legion commander immediately gave the order for all members of the Fire God race's ruler's army to self-destruct. The reason why he knew this order was because many members of the Fire God race had begun to self-destruct. It was probably because they saw that they couldn't escape and were risking their lives to drag a group of people to hell with them. However, it was a pity that Long Zai Tian had already anticipated this situation. In many cases, when there was no hope, the Fire God race would self-destruct. How could Long Zai Tian not be on guard against this move of his opponent? At this moment, the wretched-looking short young man stood up. With a flash, he left the steel fortress and went to the center of the battlefield. Then he raised his hands, and a magical and strange power instantly covered the entire battlefield. Boundary of Silence. This mysterious energy instantly covered the entire battlefield, and then it caused all the energy in the battlefield to undergo some sort of strange change. Everyone on the battlefield felt as if the energy within their bodies had suddenly fallen silent. Not to mention detonating themselves, they couldn't even execute some powerful techniques at all. Boundary of Silence, a first-grade god formation. When this technique was used, Long Yu's eyes lit up. As expected of a first-grade god formation, the legendary bridge to the demigod realm. This technique was indeed powerful. As soon as the Boundary of Silence was used, the entire battlefield became silent. No one could use too much power, and the power in their bodies became silent. The battlefield, which was originally in full swing, instantly became deserted. Get ready, let's go. With Long Zai Tian's order, the main force of the Sky Dragon Legion finally set off at this time. Almost in an instant, they descended on the battlefield and mixed with the surrounding Fire God race warriors. The reason why the Heavenly Dragon Legion descended from the sky was because of the Silence Ward. With the Silence Ward enveloping the entire area, no one could use any powerful means. The Heavenly Dragon Legion's warriors were not afraid of being killed by the 8,000 warriors of the Fire God clan. Then, the Boundary of Silence began to change. The Boundary of Silence in the entire battlefield was directly divided into 9 parts, and the Boundary of Silence in each part began to change differently. The Sky Dragon Legion had practiced such changes countless times before. When a part of the Boundary of Silence weakened, or even failed, the members of the Sky Dragon Legion in that area would immediately launch a fatal attack on the Fire God race warriors around them. The Fire God race warriors didn't know when the Boundary of Silence would weaken or strengthen. Often, after suffering a wave of attacks and killing hundreds of them, just when they wanted to fight back, the Boundary of Silence in that area would strengthen again, completely suppressing the power in their bodies. The boundary of silence in the 9 areas was constantly changing, weakening and strengthening, without the slightest pattern. In such changes, the number of the fire god race dominating the army decreased sharply. At every moment, hundreds of fire god race warriors died in the hands of the Sky Dragon Legion. This scene caused Long Yu to gasp in amazement. No wonder the Sky Dragon Legion could be invincible on the battlefield of the alien race. The mysterious effect of the Silent Barrier was a Grade 1 god formation. Coupled with their daily practice of this battle tactic, they had already perfected it a long time ago. Now that it was used, it undoubtedly produced a miraculous effect. Relying on the boundary of silence, the 9 battlefield areas were constantly changing. Every time the change began, the members of the Sky Dragon Legion were already aware of it and directly used their means to kill the Fire God Race warriors. If the Fire God Race warriors reacted half a beat too late, they could only be slaughtered. Moreover, because the changes of the boundary of silence had no pattern, only the Sky Dragon Legion soldiers who had practiced in advance could attack the fastest and most accurately. No matter how fast the Fire God Race warriors reacted, they would still be half a beat too late. In a battle of this level, a blink of an eye would mean death. In the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, less than half of the 8,000 Fire God Race sovereigns were left. Among them, the 7th and 6th phase Fire God Race sovereigns were all dead. Not a single one survived. Without a leader, the Fire God Race sovereign army became more and more chaotic, and their losses increased. Gradually, the boundary of silence was no longer needed. The situation on the battlefield had become completely one-sided. The Fire God Race's understanding of the power of the Fire Divine characters was very profound, but at this moment, it was useless. At this point in the battle, there was no longer any suspense. The number of Fire God Race sovereigns continued to decrease. 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000, the remaining Fire God Race sovereigns would choose to self-detonate. Once the boundary of silence weakened, they would immediately self-detonate. It still caused some damage to the Sky Dragon Legion and the human race's sovereign army, but the damage was not great. This was because when the Sky Dragon Legion wiped out the Fire God Race's sovereign army, they first eliminated the great sovereigns. The remaining ordinary Fire God Race sovereigns wouldn't cause space-time turbulence when they self-detonated, so they weren't particularly powerful. If the great sovereigns self-detonated, the situation would be different. Therefore, this situation had to be stopped in advance. Clearly, the Sky Dragon Legion was very experienced in battle. Throughout the battle, although there were people who were seriously injured or even died because of a moment of carelessness, the number of casualties was not high. All in all, around 10 people had died, and only a few dozen people were seriously injured. This was all because of the Fire God Race's self-detonation. Otherwise, the Sky Dragon Legion wouldn't have suffered any casualties. However, in a battle, deaths were very common. Even an elite legion like the Sky Dragon Legion couldn't avoid losing people in a battle. Unless it was a battle like before, where the Sky Dragon Legion completely relied on an ambush to fight, that kind of situation was very rare. In many cases, in a head-on battle, it was already very impressive that the Sky Dragon Legion suffered such casualties. It could even be said that such a battle record would be enough for the Legion commander to brag about for a lifetime if it were any other sovereign army. However, on the Sky Dragon Legion side, it was just a very ordinary annihilation battle under the command of Long Zaiyan. This was the elite of the human race's battlefield legion. Only with a first-class legion commander, first-class battle plan, first-class executors, and first-class combat power could one form a first-class legion on the battlefield. Chapter 1418. At this point in the war, there was no longer any suspense. The Sky Dragon Legion defeated the Fire God Race's ruler legion with an overwhelming advantage. For the human race legion that was surrounded by the Fire God Race legion, this was the second time they had been rescued recently. They didn't know why they were so unlucky to always be besieged by the Fire God Race. This time, if the Sky Dragon Legion hadn't happened to be nearby, their losses would have been extremely serious. It was even possible that the entire ruler legion would have been wiped out. Since they had won the battle, the next most important thing was to clean up the battlefield. As for the cleaning of the battlefield, the human race ruler legion didn't make any requests. Instead, they gave the right to clean up to the Sky Dragon Legion. After all, the Sky Dragon Legion had saved their entire legion of more than 5,000 people. Naturally, they had to give the Sky Dragon Legion some gifts. The resources of the Fire God Race Ruler Legion belonged to the Sky Dragon Legion. This could be considered a convention between legions on the battlefield of the foreign races. Long Zai Tian quickly sent the logistics team out to collect the many corpses of the Fire God Race Legion and the cultivation resources. Long Yu was thinking that in order to prevent the human race army from being surrounded again, perhaps the other party could follow the Heavenly Dragon Army or be guided to this steel fortress. Unfortunately, Long Zai Tian didn't have this plan. Perhaps, apart from the people of the Sky Dragon Legion, very few people were qualified to enter this steel fortress. At the very least, Long Zai Tian wouldn't let any random human race ruler legion in. This was also one of the reasons why the Sky Dragon Legion was quite mysterious in the outside world. The things they harvested again were obviously less than the first time, but it was still a great harvest. The entire Sky Dragon Legion was full of joy. Long Zai Tian distributed the things again. This time, he also asked Long Yu to ask for something, but Long Yu didn't make any requests. He had previously distributed the spoils of war for free. It could be said that Long Zai Tian was polite to the guests, but if he accepted it now, it would seem a little too much. Anyway, Long Yu didn't lack these things, so he couldn't be bothered to owe Long Zai Tian a favor. Even if the other party admitted that he was his father, Long Yu would not rely on him. Moreover, Long Zai Tian was still in a state of amnesia, and the relationship between the two of them was still in an uncertain state. The normal rescue battle ended in just 6 hours, and the entire Fire God Race's Sovereign Legion was completely annihilated. This place was not particularly far from the human race's outer domain galaxy. In other words, it would not be so easy for other experts of the Fire God clan to appear in the territory closer to the human clan. The next part of the journey could be said to be smooth sailing. However, for Long Yu, the next part of the journey was the most crucial step. This was because Long Yu was going to take Long Zaiyan to see his mother, Bei Yu Yao. Compared to White Cloud Track, Bei Yu Yao clearly cared a lot more about Long Zai Tian. To White Cloud, even if Long Zai Tian didn't appear, his life was already set in stone. He would continue on this path. But it was not the case for Bei Yu Yao. What choice Long Zai Tian made would obviously determine the direction of Bei Yu Yao's life in the future. For Bei Yu Yao, the two most important people in her life were undoubtedly Long Zai Tian and Long Yu. Go see the wife you mentioned. This is not urgent, but your distribution of the spoils of war last time has been decided. In the room, Long Zai Tian smiled at Long Yu, then took out a storage ring and handed it to Long Yu. Long Yu took the storage ring and saw that there were 3 corpses of the Fire God race at the 5th level Sovereign Realm. After all, he only watched the battle from the sidelines. The Sky Dragon Legion giving him the corpses of the 5th level Sovereign Realm Fire God race was already quite good. Although he didn't get the corpses of the 7th or 6th level Fire God race's Great Sovereign Realm, Long Yu was already satisfied. After all, this was something he obtained without any effort. He was already very embarrassed to accept it. So what qualifications did he have to ask for anything else? There weren't many 7th or 6th level Fire God race's Great Sovereign Realm corpses to begin with. There were many people in the Sky Dragon Legion who needed them, including the wretched short youth who used the silent barrier. Long Yu still didn't know the guy's name, but it wasn't important. In any case, the other party was a core member of the Sky Dragon Legion. In the future, Long Yu might not have any interactions with him. If the other party didn't take the initiative to introduce him, Long Yu wouldn't ask. Long Yu sealed the 3 5th level Sovereign Realm Fire God Race corpses in the Dragon Bone Ancient Tower. He discovered that it would take 9 days to transform one of them. This should be related to the strength of the corpses. It would take him about a day to transform a 3rd level Fire God Race corpse into a darkness creature. A 5th-level fire god race corpse's basic strength was about 10 times that of a 3rd-level dominator, so the transformation would take about 9 to 10 days. If he wanted to transform a 7th-level dominator into a darkness creature, it would take about a day. In other words, it would take 3 months. This was a bit too long for Long Yu, but it wasn't necessary. After all, he wouldn't be of much help. A 5th-level dominator darkness creature was more than enough for him to deal with normal situations. The Sky Dragon Legion's gains had nothing to do with Long Yu. Indeed, from this, Long Yu could tell that if he could win consecutively on the battlefield of the foreign races and continuously defeat his opponents, the benefits he would obtain would be extremely shocking. Not to mention anything else. Just the benefits brought to the Heavenly Dragon Army by these 2 waves of Fire God race's Master Legions were worth at least hundreds of millions of battlefield military merit points. Although the entire Sky Dragon Legion was divided equally among the tens of thousands of people, each person would at least obtain tens of thousands of battlefield merit points. This was already a huge amount of wealth for ordinary dominators. If Long Zai really needed cultivation resources at certain times, he would just have to come out and fight and kill a Dominator Legion, and he would immediately obtain a lot of battlefield merit points. However, if it wasn't a special situation, Long Zai wouldn't take all the spoils for himself. In the Sky Dragon Legion, every member needed to cultivate and increase their strength. Only then would they be able to fight against stronger outsiders in the future and obtain even more benefits. After all, Long Yu was now someone who wanted to develop his own faction. He was quite willing to research the various models of the Sky Dragon Legion. This included the construction of the patrol team, logistics team, execution team, etc., which gave Long Yu some inspiration. In the future, when he was developing his faction in the Void Galaxy, he could use this model to construct the framework of the entire organization. Since he wanted to develop his own faction, he naturally needed a complete organization structure. He couldn't keep it scattered like before. Otherwise, if he was attacked by an opponent, the entire Void Galaxy would probably be in a mess. Although the Void Galaxy definitely wouldn't be discovered by any hostile faction at this stage, and thus attract any threats, there would come a day when the Void Galaxy would face all kinds of opponents. Long Yu had to be prepared for that. Long Yu sealed the 3 corpses of the fire gods into the ancient Dragon Bone Tower. The consciousness of the ancient Dragon Bone Tower was also quite happy. After all, this meant that the ancient Dragon Bone Tower's ability had been strengthened, and it could help Long Yu more. Although the consciousness of the ancient Dragon Bone Tower was very cold and mechanical, there was no doubt that it was loyal to Long Yu. It would still be very happy to be able to help Long Yu more. Speaking of which, Long Yu hadn't given this consciousness a name yet. After thinking about it, Long Yu decided to call it Little Tower. Little Void and Little Tower, the consciousness of the 2 battle weapons, could be said to be Long Yu's closest friends. The thoughts of the 3 were completely interconnected. If Long Yu wanted them to do something, he didn't need to say it out loud. He just needed to think about it. This was the benefit of being compatible with the battle weapon to the unparalleled level. The only thing that puzzled Long Yu was that he hadn't awakened the Netherworld Dragon Blade to level 1. Logically speaking, awakening the level 1 absolute beginning divine grade should be very easy. Could it be that because Little Void is a special absolute beginning divine grade, it's harder to awaken than other absolute beginning divine grade weapons? Long Yu thought to himself. The more he thought about it, the more likely it was. After all, the effect of awakening Little Void to level 1 was equivalent to awakening other absolute beginning divine grade weapons to level 6 or even level 7. Could it be that the difficulty of awakening was similar? This could also explain why Long Yu hadn't been able to awaken the Netherworld Dragon Blade for so long. Shaking his head, Long Yu didn't think too much about this. After all, the awakening of an absolute beginning divine grade weapon wasn't something that a cultivator could control. It could only happen naturally. Next, Long Yu's thoughts were still on Long Zai. After seeing the white clouds, Long Zai didn't remember anything in the past. It could be seen that he was either pretending or he had completely lost his memory. If that was the case, even if he met Bei Yu Yao, it would be difficult for him to remember anything. If that was the case, wouldn't Bei Yu Yao be happy for nothing? But no matter what, now that he had found Long Zai Tian, Long Yu couldn't hide it from Bei Yu Yao. No matter what the result was, he had to let them meet. As for the result, it wasn't something that Long Yu could control. Even if he didn't succeed in the end, there shouldn't be any regrets for Bei Yu Yao. As Long Yu thought to himself, he searched for Bei Yu Yao's location in the small world. Then, he wrapped himself and Long Zai Tian in the world energy and moved towards his small world. Once again, they arrived at the center of the new martial world, on the continent of the Northern Snow Empire. Chapter 1419. Long Zaiqian and Long Yu once again returned to the small world inside the Nine Serenities prison tablet. During this time, Long Yu knew that his mother, Bei Yu Yao, had been traveling around the new martial world. To ensure her safety, Yu Hanxin sent a female disciple to follow Bei Yu Yao. Firstly, she wanted to ensure that nothing would happen to her. Secondly, she wanted someone to accompany Bei Yu Yao. Thirdly, she wanted to train that female disciple of hers. After all, Bei Yu Yao had just stepped into the early stage of the King's stage. Although Long Yu had taken care of her, and she had obtained a lot of cultivation resources, her heart was tied to Long Zaiqian, so she had no way to concentrate on her cultivation. Therefore, she wanted to travel around to relax. As for Dou Zicheng, who had always been with her, he had now joined the alliance of 5 emperors and had long been separated from Bei Yu Yao. After all, Bei Yu Yao was worried about Long Zaiqian. As a man, he was embarrassed to be with Bei Yu Yao all the time. Dou Zicheng came from the 9 Heaven Star Palace on the Heavenly Mandate Island. He stood up for Bei Yu Yao, but was chased by the elders of the 9 Heavens operation. Coincidentally, he was rescued by Long Yu, who had just obtained the Dragon Skeleton Ancient Tower. After that, because he followed Long Yu, he always walked together with Bei Yu Yao. The two of them could be considered to be very good friends. Dou Zicheng was originally very good friends with Long Zai Tian, otherwise he would not have been willing to be chased by the sect elders for Bei Yu Yao. When Long Yu went to the Beyond Heaven world, Bei Yu Yao and Yu Hanxin developed a good relationship and settled down in the Northern Snow Empire. As for Dou Zicheng, he went to the Alliance of 5 Emperors and joined the Alliance of 5 Emperors to continue to pursue martial arts. Long Yu was very grateful to Dou Zicheng for having been hunted down for the sake of Bei Yu Yao. However, for such a long time, Long Yu had provided him with a lot of cultivation resources. They did not owe each other anything. If they had the chance to meet, they would still be friends. However, Long Yu would not take the initiative to find him. Bei Yu Yao was different. After all, she was Long Yu's mother. As she was still traveling around the Northern Snow Empire, it wasn't easy for Long Yu to find her. However, Long Yu was the master of this small world after all. Under the power of the world, everything in this small world had nowhere to hide. Before long, Long Yu found Bei Yu Yao's location. She was in the northern part of the Northern Snow Empire, enjoying the snowy scenery in a world of ice and snow. As expected, there was a young girl accompanying Bei Yu Yao. Long Yu remembered that she was Yu Hanxin's disciple. Although Long Yu wasn't present, he was aware of everything that was going on. Bei Yu Yao was chatting with the girl, calling her Yu. She was now a mid-stage great emperor, enough to keep Bei Yu Yao safe within the borders of the Northern Snow Empire. Long Yu brought Long Zai Tian and instantly arrived in the air above the ice field. They were bathed in the falling snow and temporarily did not descend. "That's my mother, Bei Yu Yao," Long Yu said as he pointed at Bei Yu Yao, who was still covered in snowflakes. With Long Yu's current abilities, it was impossible for anyone to notice him appearing in the air above Bei Yu Yao. Even Yu wouldn't be able to detect him. Long Zai Tian nodded and narrowed his eyes to observe Bei Yu Yao. Right at this moment, Long Yu suddenly frowned. He noticed that Yu Hanxin's female disciple, Yu seemed to have moved. She raised her head in puzzlement and looked towards the sky. Did she notice something? Long Yu's expression didn't change, but he was starting to get suspicious. He and Long Zai Tian's aura were concealed by his balance control. Not to mention a mid-stage great emperor. Even a third or fourth stage sovereign wouldn't be able to detect them. But judging from Yu Er's expression, it was clear that she had discovered something. This made Long Yu click his tongue in wonder. He carefully observed the young girl and saw that she was a delicate and pretty girl. In the Northern Snow Empire, a mid-stage great emperor at this age was definitely a genius amongst geniuses. It was no wonder that Yu Hanxin took a liking to her and took her in as a disciple. Yu Er's ears were much sharper than the average person's. It was hard to say whether she was relying on perception or her ears to detect that something was amiss. No matter what, Long Yu was certain that Yu had discovered his and Long Zai Tian's presence. At the very least, she had sensed that something was amiss. This kind of ability was extremely rare, and it piqued Long Yu's interest. If he were to bring Yu along when he was on a mission, many things would become much more convenient. However, she was Yu Hanxin's disciple. Long Yu didn't want to steal her away. He could only wait and get to know her first. "Commander, let's go down. They've already discovered us." Long Yu said faintly as he looked down at Bei Yuyao and Yu. They both assumed a vigilant posture. Evidently, because of Yu Er's vigilance, Bei Yuyao also knew that someone was hiding in the snow above. Since that was the case, there was no need to continue hiding. Admittedly, Long Yu could continue using the Book of Shadows to turn into nothingness, and Long Zai Tian had his own ways to hide even deeper. But there was no need to do so when facing these two women. The two of them revealed themselves and teleported downwards, arriving not far from the two women in the blink of an eye. Amidst the flying snow, Long Zai Tian raised his hand, and all the snowflakes stopped in midair, completely motionless. Just like that, they froze in midair. Long Zai Tian and Bei Yuyao saw each other through the falling snow and took in each other's faces. Long Yu could tell that Bei Yuyao had wanted to greet Long Yu when she saw him. After all, she hadn't seen Long Yu for a long time. But very quickly, she saw Long Zai Tian's face clearly. She was stunned. Brother Tian? Bei Yuyao was stunned on the spot. She pursed her lips and murmured in disbelief. She hadn't expected that Long Zai Tian, who she had been thinking about day and night, would suddenly appear in front of her. She couldn't be mistaken, because Long Zai Tian was exactly the same as the Long Zai Tian from many years ago. He hadn't changed at all. Long Zai Tian could clearly see the deep affection in Bei Yuyao's eyes. However, he seemed to shrink back a little at this moment. That was because he couldn't remember anything about this woman in front of him. Under such circumstances, if he wanted to lie to this woman or tell the truth, it would cause her pain. Long Zai Tian couldn't bring himself to do such a thing. Although Long Zai Tian was an army commander on the battlefield against the other races, he had come to Long Yu's pocket world to find his lost memories. Now, he was afraid that he couldn't find his memories, but it was really cruel to ask him to hurt a woman's heart. This situation was different from when he had met Bai Yun Zai Tian. Even if he didn't remember Bai Yun Zai Tian, he could still communicate with him as a new friend. However, Long Zai Tian couldn't do this in front of Bei Yuyao. "Mother," he lost his memories. Long Yu looked at the complicated expressions on their faces and shook his head. In the end, he still helped to say the truth. Moreover, it seems like there's no way to find his lost memories. If I could remember a beautiful woman like Yuyao, I would definitely remember her at first sight. However, I don't remember anything about you. Long Zai Tian also sighed. Bei Yuyao wasn't disappointed when she heard Long Yu and Long Zai Tian's words. Instead, there was a look of gratification in her eyes. No wonder you didn't come back to look for us all these years. I thought that when you entered the Heaven Prison lightning pool back then. It's good that you're alive. It's good that you're alive. As Bei Yuyao spoke, she smiled as tears rolled down her cheeks. She was really happy because this meant that Long Zai Tian hadn't abandoned her all these years. It was only because he had lost his memories. However, she also felt an indescribable pain in her heart. Long Zai Tian hadn't remembered her after seeing her. Didn't it mean that Long Zai Tian might not be able to find his lost memories? If he couldn't find them, what would she do? "Mother, if you have anything to say, just say it to him. Who knows? He might remember something. You and I will leave first. Long Yu thought for a moment before speaking to Bei Yuyao. Then, he gave Yu a look. Yu had been with Bei Yuyao for so long. Of course, she knew who Bei Yuyao had been thinking about all these years. Now that she had suddenly met Long Zai, she could more or less understand Bei Yuyao's feelings. There was no need for outsiders to be present. However, Yu looked at Long Yu with a strange expression on her face. Wasn't this brat the master of the small world she was currently in, Long Yu? Wasn't he Bei Yuyao's son? At this time, shouldn't he stay and comfort Bei Yuyao? Long Yu felt that there was no point in staying. After all, the relationship between Bei Yuyao and Long Zai was between the two of them. There was nothing he could do to help them decide what to do next. After all, when it had separated, Long Yu was just a baby who couldn't speak. There was no need to stand between the two of them. Even though Long Zai had lost his memories, with his emotional intelligence, he knew what to do now. On the contrary, Long Yu was quite interested in Yu. Of course, he wasn't interested in that aspect. He was interested in her almost innate intuition. He wanted to chat with Yu and ask her how she had discovered him. This was something that Long Yu was quite concerned about. In comparison, although he was concerned about Bei Yuyao's matter, he couldn't intervene. It was better to let the adults solve it themselves. Long Yu walked to the side with Yu. While he was curious about Yu was equally curious about him. She had never seen Long Yu before. She had only followed her master, Yu Hanxin, and now Bei Yuyao. She often heard of Long Yu's name. Over time, she had long been very curious about Long Yu. Chapter 1420. Long Zai and Bei Yuyao looked at each other, speechless. No one knew what to say first. Long Yu did not stay in this awkward place. Although he hoped that his parents could reconcile, this kind of thing was not something he could decide as a junior. Long Yu walked to the side with Yu. The snow continued to fall, but only in the area near Long Zai and Bei Yuyao. The snow stopped in the air, as if it would last forever. Long Yu, why don't you go and talk to Sister Yuyao? You should know how important Long Zai is to Sister Yuyao. Even if Long Zai lost his memory, Sister Yuyao can't live without him. Yu whispered to Long Yu. Long Yu shook his head and said, My mother is very strong. She is not as fragile as you think. If Long Zai really does not admit it because he lost his memory, she will not pester him anymore. Trust me. Although Long Yu did not spend much time with Bei Yuyao, he could see some of her character from her daily behavior. Just because of Long Zai, she was imprisoned in the Northern Academy of the Heavenly Mandate Realm for more than 10 years. How could anyone bear this kind of loneliness? But Bei Yuyao completely endured it, which showed that she was strong-willed. Before, she could not forget about Long Zai because she did not know where Long Zai was. This kind of tangled thinking was the source of Bei Yuyao's melancholy. Now Long Zai finally appeared in front of her. The meeting that she had missed for many years was finally realized. Even if Long Zai had lost his memory, it was enough for Bei Yuyao to let go of the previous obsession. As for what Bei Yuyao would do next, Long Yu did not know. But he was sure that Bei Yuyao would not die because of losing Long Zai at this time. She had never been such a fragile person. But you, how did you find us before Long Zai and I appeared? Long Yu was even more curious about this and directly asked Yu. When Yu heard this, she carefully looked at Long Yu and said, I don't know. I just have a feeling that I was accepted as a direct disciple by Master. It was because I accidentally discovered her hidden whereabouts that she accepted me as a disciple. This innate instinct is pretty good. Long Yu's eyes lit up. I was right. This is just the kind of innate intuition. After all, if it was a martial arts secret technique, it would not have such a heaven-defying effect. Long Yu, could it be that your concealment technique is so powerful that you're so confident that no one will see you? Yu pursed her lips. She was curious about Long Yu. But in the end, Long Yu was Bei Yuyao's son, so she wasn't afraid of Long Yu. She could say whatever she wanted to say. Even though Long Yu was the master of this small world, she wasn't afraid of him. This kind of personality was to Long Yu's liking. Of course, He wasn't trying to flirt with other girls. He just admired this lass's temperament. Of course I have this bit of confidence. In fact, other than you, no one below the ruler's secret realm has been able to discover my hidden tracks. Long Yu said honestly with a smile. If that's the case, I should be honored. Yu smiled, and her eyes were clear. Seeing how calm Long Yu was, she let go of the trace of nervousness in her heart. What does it feel like to have a small world? How many cultivation resources do I need to enter the ruler's secret realm? What's the fastest way to cultivate a martial arts secret technique? After letting go, Yu couldn't keep her mouth shut. She kept asking questions about cultivation to Long Yu. As for the questions that he could answer, Long Yu answered them directly. There were many things that he had experienced, so there was no harm in sharing them with Yu. However, there were some things that could only be comprehended by oneself and couldn't be taught through words. For example, in order to enter the ruler's secret realm, one had to comprehend the power of creation. However, the power of creation wasn't something that could be comprehended just by listening to others. Long Yu was able to comprehend the power of creation because he controlled 80% of the 9 Nether Dragon Seal and entered the core of the 9 Nether Profound Palace. If it weren't for that, Long Yu didn't know how long he would have been stuck at the threshold of the ruler's secret realm. As the two chatted, time passed quickly. Long Yu also asked a few questions about Yu Hanxin's current situation. As it turned out, Yu Hanxin had already stepped into the 5-star Emperor realm. Although there weren't any items of creation for her to absorb, she relied on her own martial arts talent to forcibly increase her martial arts realm. This kind of talent wasn't something that just anyone had. If Long Yu hadn't left the small world, he wouldn't have been able to obtain so many items of creation. It would have been extremely difficult for him to rely on his talent to increase his strength. As a 5-star emperor, Yu Hanxin still stayed in Long Yu's small world to ensure the smooth development of the Northern Snow Empire. This country was a precious existence that Yu Hanxin's elders had left for her. She couldn't bear to let this country decline just like that. Although the Northern Snow Empire was located in the center of the new martial world, above the holy city of the 5 emperors, and its geographical location was already extremely advantageous, Yu Hanxin still wasn't at ease. When she was in the Northern Snow Empire, Yu Hanxin had vigorously recruited talented personal disciples and cultivated a strong army to ensure that the Northern Snow Empire would have the strongest combat strength after she left. As for Yu Hanxin herself, she had recently prepared to leave the new martial world. It was from Yu Hanxin that Long Yu learned about this situation. Otherwise, he really wanted to run over and ask Yu Hanxin how long she wanted to stay in this small world. If she wanted to stay for a long time, Long Yu didn't mind providing her with some creations first. After all, Yu Hanxin wasn't weak, and she was one of Long Yu's trusted friends. If her martial arts cultivation improved, it would only benefit Long Yu. Previously, Long Yu didn't have enough creations for himself. But now, Long Yu didn't have any particular need. Especially if he returned to the Void Galaxy, he could get a lot of creations. It was worth mentioning that if Yu Hanxin wanted to leave, she would leave with her 6 personal disciples. They were going to explore the outside world together, including the girl in front of Long Yu, Yu was currently in the Middle Emperor realm. In the secret realms of the King's Path, she wasn't very powerful. Therefore, Yu Hanxin wanted to wait until her personal disciples all reached the level of the Emperor before taking them to the outside world. As for how to go to the outside world, they could only go through Long Yu. Long Yu had some ideas about this. His friend would go to the Void Galaxy anyway. Why not take some time to go back to the Void Galaxy and see what was going on? Long Yu hadn't seen Consort Yu for a long time. He wondered if she had made any breakthroughs in martial arts. Calculating the time, if Long Yu went back to the Void Galaxy and came out within 3 days, he could still make it to the shelves of the Demigods College's biannual new goods. He was mainly concerned about the divine wine. He didn't care about anything else. After all, the amount of divine wine represented how long it would take him to fully understand the revelation-level divine characters of Netherworld, the primordial power of water, and the primordial power of metal. It would be a great improvement to his strength. It was a world of ice and snow all around them. Snowflakes continued to fall. Long Yu and Er's bodies were quickly covered in snow. However, the two of them casually used the power within their bodies to evaporate all the snow into water vapor. Not far away, Long Zaiqian and Bei Yuyao had been chatting since the beginning. Although they didn't know what they were talking about, they seemed to be in a good mood. Finally, after about 4 hours, Bei Yuyao bowed to Long Zaiqian and turned around to walk to Long Yu and Yuer. Sister Yuyao, how is it? Seeing this, Yuer ran over and asked, It's nothing. Although we can't be together, I've finally untied a knot in my heart. Bei Yuyao smiled. There wasn't any sadness in the depths of her eyes. It was just as Long Yu had expected. Once the knot in her heart was untied, she wouldn't have any big thoughts anymore. As for the result, Long Yu should know. Anyway, Bei Yuyao probably wouldn't be going with Long Zaiqian. Did he really lose his memory? Can't he remember anything? Yuer asked sadly as she looked at Long Zaiqian, who was standing not far away. Well, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just curious about what he experienced back then. As Bei Yuyao spoke, she turned her head and glanced at Long Yu. She smiled and said, Little Yu, take me to the beyond heaven world. I've abandoned the path of martial arts for so many years. It's time to pick it up and continue on. Originally, Bei Yuyao had been seriously injured, but Long Yu had completely healed her. After all, he had obtained many immemorial level healing elixirs. It was easy for him to treat Bei Yuyao's serious injuries. Therefore, Bei Yuyao's martial arts realm had improved recently, but it wasn't fast. After all, she had a knot in her heart and couldn't focus most of her attention on cultivation. But now it was different. Bei Yuyao was the daughter of the North Yard Lord of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, and her martial arts talent was excellent. It could be said that with Bei Yuyao's talent, if she worked hard, she might not be any worse than Man Xian and Chihua, who were by Long Yu's side. To Long Yu, this was naturally good news. To be able to let Bei Yuyao walk out from the knot in her heart was also not bad. Although Long Zaiqian lost his memories and couldn't remember the past, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Although Long Yu didn't know what Bei Yuyao and Long Zaiqian talked about, Bei Yuyao's decision was not bad for Long Yu. At least it was an acceptable decision. Chapter 14:21. Mother, if you want to leave, I will arrange it. But not now. Wait until we reach a safe place in the outside world, then I will let you out. Otherwise, I can't guarantee your safety. Long Yu said solemnly to Bei Yuyao. Well, no problem. Whenever is convenient for you. I also have to make some preparations. I need to say goodbye to some friends. Bei Yuyao nodded with a smile. Well, then I will leave first. The situation outside has not been completely resolved. Long Yu also smiled and said, the outside world was still the battlefield of the foreign races. They could encounter danger at any time or some special situation, just like when a human race's ruler army was suddenly surrounded by the fire god race. As long as they were in the territory of the foreign races, they could face danger at any time. This danger did not only come from the fire god race, but also from other foreign races. No one knew exactly how many foreign races were plotting against the human race in this area at this moment. After leaving Bei Yuyao and Long Yu and Long Zaiqian left the small world and returned to Long Zaiqian's room in the Steel Fortress. What did you talk about? Long Yu was a little curious about this, so he asked casually. I said, although I can't remember my previous memories, I am still very willing to bring her along. Maybe I will remember it someday. Long Zaiqian spread his hands and said, unfortunately, she is not willing to wait for me to regain my memories. Instead, she said that instead of waiting for my memories to return, it is better to work hard from now on so that I can get to know her again. I quite like this woman, huh? I want to slap you. Although you have lost your memories, what happened between you and her is the truth. You even have a son. Long Yu curled his lips and said, but since you can't remember, there is no other way. This matter can be taken slowly. Since there is nothing here, I have to leave first. Where are you going? Long Zaiqian asked, There is still a long distance from here to the outer domain galaxy. I am afraid it is not very safe for you to be alone. Why not come with us to the vicinity of the human battlefield? There's no need. Since I can come here alone, of course I can go back alone. Why are you worried about me? Long Yu shook his head, waved his hand at Long Zai, and walked out of the steel fortress. Long Zai didn't stop him. He watched as Long Yu left and smiled in relief. Then, he ordered the Heavenly Dragon Army to open the door and let Long Yu leave the fortress. After exiting the steel fortress, Long Yu's vision once again returned to an endless void. He discovered that he could no longer sense the existence of the steel fortress the moment he walked out of it. That invisibility ability had even fooled Long Yu. This was completely normal. After all, Long Yu's current spiritual awareness wasn't particularly strong. Even with the addition of balance control, his spiritual awareness was only equivalent to that of a 4th or 5th phase ruler. He just didn't know that when Long Yu became a 4th or 5th phase ruler, the strength of his spiritual awareness would definitely surpass that of an ordinary 7th phase ruler. It might even be close to the level of a demigod expert. At that time, would he be able to sense the existence of the steel fortress that was the Heavenly Dragon Army? With this question in mind, Long Yu hid his figure alone, turned into nothingness, and disappeared into the void. The human clan's Dominator Corps that had been rescued by the Heavenly Dragon Legion had already separated from the Heavenly Dragon Legion and left this place. They should have gone ahead and wanted to return to the human clan's battlefield fortress to rest and reorganize as soon as possible. Long Yu, after transforming into nothingness, also rapidly traversed towards the direction of the human clan's outer realm Star River. Relying on the Void Nether Dragon Blade's void travel, his speed was much faster than the Heavenly Dragon Army's steel fortress. After turning into nothingness, only demigod existences could discover Long Yu's figure. Therefore, all the members of the Heavenly Dragon Army, including Long Zai, had completely lost track of Long Yu. This made the members of the Heavenly Dragon Army click their tongues in amazement. As expected of the commander's son. Amazing. This kind of saying spread to every corner of the Heavenly Dragon Army, which made Long Zai quite puzzled. After all, even as the commander of the Heavenly Dragon Army, he didn't have such a powerful concealment ability. Most importantly, Long Yu was already so powerful when he was only a high-level ruler. When he stepped into the Great Ruler level, wouldn't he be even more invincible? Of course, Long Yu couldn't be bothered about what the people of the Heavenly Dragon Army thought. He only knew that he needed to meet up with Red Oriole as soon as possible, then finish a few training missions in the Demigod Academy, wait for the new batch of divine wine to be put on the shelves in the Demigod Academy, and then cultivate again to improve his strength. However, halfway through his journey, he encountered another accident. When a Nether Dragon Blade brought him directly to the halfway point, a violent burst of flame divine text power erupted in front of him, and suddenly enveloped Long Yu. The explosion of flame divine text power most likely meant that a tyrannical fire god race had appeared in front of him. Long Yu's heart trembled. He just happened to pass through the void and collided with it. He didn't have a good way to dodge at the moment, and could only activate the Book of Shadows. His entire body turned into the flame divine text power and completely merged with it. In this way, he was able to come out of this sudden explosion unscathed. When his situation stabilized, he looked around and finally found the situation in this place somewhat familiar. A large group of fire god race appeared in front of Long Yu. There were about 100 of them, and each of them was at least a 6th phase great ruler existence. Among them, there were 12 7th phase great rulers of the fire god race, and a total of more than 120 fire god race members surrounded the human race ruler army. Seeing this scene, Long Yu's face immediately twitched. Wasn't this human race ruler army the one he had rescued from the encirclement before? And it was also the one that was rescued by the Heavenly Dragon Army not long ago. Now, this human race ruler army was actually surrounded by the fire god race once again. What kind of sin have I committed? Long Yu's face darkened. The situation in front of him really made him complain about his incompetence. However, from this, he deduced that the fire god race must have something special about this human race ruler army for them to pursue and annihilate this human race ruler army so relentlessly. Otherwise, how could they surround and attack him time and time again? Moreover, the fire god race must have a way to grasp the whereabouts of this ruler army. Otherwise, it would be impossible to find them so quickly and even catch up to them and surround them. It was very likely that this human race ruler army had stolen something from the fire god race. Long Yu deduced this point, but it was useless, because in the current situation, there was nothing he could do to help. In his eyes, the total number of people in the human race's ruler's army was less than 4,000. Another 2,000 people had lost their lives and would never be able to return to their homeland. And in the battlefield, there were more than 120 fire god race powerhouses. They could easily crush all the people in this human race ruler army. Although I can't fight against these fire god race powerhouses, it's not good to watch them die. In that case, I will save as many as I can. As Long Yu thought to himself, he continued to transform into nothingness and flew toward the center of the battle. The distance between them wasn't far. Based on this situation, Long Yu would soon be able to fly into the middle of the battle. Then, he would find some time to pull the human race ruler's army into his own small world. That way, he would be able to hide and avoid the fate of being killed by the fire god race. The only problem was how long you could make the people of the human race ruler army voluntarily come to his small world. This was a problem. Generally speaking, every ruler army had a special communication method. If Long Yu told the commander of the ruler army that he wanted to save people, he should be able to convey it to the rest of the army, right? In any case, the ruler army had been besieged by the fire god race 3 times in a row. They were really unlucky. Long Yu couldn't stand it anymore. He would save as many people as he could. First, he saw the commander of the ruler army. He was a 7th-stage, sovereign realm human powerhouse. At this time, he was surrounded by 5 7th-stage, sovereign realm experts from the fire god race. 1 against 5, he was forced to retreat again and again. The commander of a human race ruler army gritted his teeth and endured. He could feel the heavy casualties of his brothers around him. His heart was bleeding. These days, the ruler army that he led had suffered a lot. However, the key problem was that even he didn't know why he was so unlucky. Did the fire god race really have their eyes on their army? Even though they had lost more than 10,000 fire god race experts, they still weren't willing to give up so easily. If I knew this would happen, I would have moved with the Sky Dragon army. Unfortunately, I don't know where the Sky Dragon army is now. The commander of the ruler army was very anxious. If they didn't have the help of the other armies, the entire ruler army would definitely be annihilated today. At this time, the burly commander suddenly received a divine sense. This divine sense was slightly familiar, and he quickly remembered. Wasn't this the divine sense aura of Long Yu, the one who came to save them the first time they were besieged? After all, Long Yu had moved with the ruler army for a period of time. The commander immediately recognized Long Yu's divine sense. Long Yu's divine sense said, "Commander, if there is no other way, give the order for your army to not resist. Let them enter my small world. I am confident that I can bring them all back alive." After receiving Long Yu's divine sense, the commander was undoubtedly overjoyed. He immediately used the special communication method of the ruler army to spread the news. Immediately after, Long Yu began to move. Chapter 1422. Long Yu shuttled through the void at high speed. He kept one sovereign mystic realm expert after another into his own small world before turning into nothingness and hiding again. Every time he appeared, it was only for a split second. The experts of the fire god race who had surrounded the human race's sovereign mystic realm expert quickly found out about his existence. He was constantly saving the sovereign mystic realm experts, but he was unable to find Long Yu. One had to know that Long Yu could turn into nothingness. Only existences in the demigod realm would be able to find him. Under such circumstances, Long Yu very quickly saved more than 100 people. He was very familiar with the process, and his speed of saving people became even faster. Although he was saving people like this, Long Yu still felt very strange. He didn't know why the Fire God race was so obsessed with dealing with the Sovereign Mystic Realm army. Was it really because the Sovereign Mystic Realm army was too unlucky? Or was there some other reason? If Long Yu knew the reason, he might be able to gain something from it. He might be able to let the Sovereign Mystic Realm army understand why they were so unlucky to be targeted. Unfortunately, even the commander of the Sovereign Mystic Realm army didn't know the reason. He was either hiding it, or he really didn't know. But I'm about to lose my life. Even if I hide it, there's no point, Long Yu thought to himself. He continued to save people. Regardless of whether he knew the truth or not, the only thing he could do now was save people. He would save as many as he could. Although the Sovereign Mystic Realm army didn't give him this task, he knew that the more people he saved, the more rewards he would get when he went back. Even if there was no reward, Long Yu would do his best to save as many people as he could. In any case, he wouldn't suffer any losses. If he could save so many people's lives, why wouldn't he do it? Logically or emotionally, Long Yu had no reason to back down. Under the constant slaughter of the Fire God race, fewer and fewer people were left in the human race's army of rulers. Long Yu was not picky when it came to saving people. As long as he could conveniently save them, he would wrap them up with the power of his world and send them into his small world. It didn't matter if they were lesser hegemons, intermediate hegemons, high hegemons, or great hegemons. Long Yu saved them all. Soon, there were more than 500 human hegemons gathered in the pocket dimension. Meanwhile, in the great world, the number of people in the Autarch's army kept decreasing. The rate at which they were dying was about the same as the rate at which Long Yu was saving people. In a short period of time, only 3,000 of the original 4,000 remained. Save another 1,000 people and leave quickly. The rest of US will hold them off for you. The commander of the Juggernaut army was almost at his limit, but he still did not let Long Yu save him. From his tone, one could hear a hint of guilt and self-blame. As a commander, he had failed to protect the members of his Juggernaut army. This was undoubtedly a failure. Under such a failure, he could only rely on Long Yu if he wanted as many of his people as possible to survive. He truly didn't expect that a high-level ruler like Long Yu would actually be able to act like a fish in water in this battlefield filled with sovereigns and even rescue his people. However, no matter what, it was good that he was able to rescue them. If it wasn't for Long Yu's arrival, all of them would most likely have been wiped out. When Long Yu heard the commander's words, he didn't think much of it. He immediately began to save people even faster. In fact, to make it easier to save people, Long Yu discovered that many people in the Juggernaut army were spontaneously moving closer to each other. This way, Long Yu could save more people at once and increase the efficiency of the rescue. Although the speed of rescuing people was faster because there were fewer and fewer humans on the battlefield, the speed at which the Fire God race slaughtered the humans also became faster and faster. The number of people being killed and those being saved still maintained a balance. When Long Yu appeared, he was able to save dozens of people. But at the same time, the Fire God clan also began to send people to stop him. They even guessed where he might appear to save people and set up some simple spell formations to deal with him. Unfortunately, Long Yu's spiritual sense was very strong. These simple arrays seemed to appear directly in front of him. How could he run into them? If he couldn't save people here, he would go to the other side to save people. If he wanted to be saved by Long Yu, then the Juggernaut army's Juggernaut experts had to stall the Fire God race in the surroundings or clean up the traps. Everyone knew the importance of this. It was impossible for Long Yu to sacrifice himself to save them. According to the Legion commander, Long Yu quickly rescued a total of 1,500 people and placed them in his small world. After that, there were only 1,000 people left on the battlefield. The other 1,500 people had died under the slaughter of the Fire God race's great sovereign. The remaining 1,000 people began to desperately attack the Fire God race's Juggernaut experts, dragging every Fire God race's Juggernaut experts into the battle. Under such circumstances, Long Yu turned into nothingness and flew far away. Since he had concealed himself, no one from the Fire God race could discover him. The Fire God race was still preventing Long Yu from appearing again to save people. They wanted to capture Long Yu, but they didn't expect that Long Yu had already left quietly. Being able to save 1,500 people was already a very good result. Long Yu's inner strength had already been exhausted several times. If it weren't for someone who happened to know a secret martial arts technique that could transfer power to Long Yu and replenish his energy, Long Yu might not even have enough pills on him. After all, the Fire God race's Juggernaut army was one of the human race's Juggernaut experts. Their warriors knew a lot of secret techniques, such as transferring energy, concealing aura, increasing speed, and so on. Long Yu could be considered to have eaten a wave of benefits. It made it harder to detect him when he hid, and his speed was faster when he flew away. Before long, he brought the 1,500 Juggernaut experts to a distance of at least 1,000,000 miles away from that area. Only then did he relax a little. However, what puzzled Long Yu was that he still felt that he was in danger, as if there was something following him. But even with his spiritual sense, he couldn't find out what was chasing him. This feeling made Long Yu not dare to stop for even a second. He controlled the Nether Void Dragon Blade to pierce through the void, trying to run as far as possible. Calculating the distance, if Long Yu wanted to return to the nearest human battlefield fortress, he would need at least a day's time. In this one day's time, any accident could happen, and he absolutely couldn't afford to be careless. Otherwise, it was very likely that tragedy would befall Long Yu. After all, his opponents were a large group of peak Sovereign Realm experts from the Fire God race. Moreover, Long Yu had a strange premonition that he was being followed. It was very likely that the other party could still track him down. Long Yu continued to run. About half a day later, the situation finally changed for the worse. Because Long Yu could feel that the thing following him was still there, and he couldn't shake it off. He had no idea what it was. Then, the more he advanced, the more he could feel the temperature around him gradually rising. Before he could react, he fell into a space barrier. Someone caught him. One by one, the figures of the Fire God race appeared around Long Yu. A total of hundreds of Fire God race sovereigns surrounded him from all directions. When Long Yu was rushing, he didn't turn into nothingness, but now he had no choice but to use his means. He didn't know how the other party caught up with him, nor did he know why the other party had to catch up with him, but now he had to escape from this encirclement. Path of the Nine Underworld. Long Yu directly activated a powerful magical method, the Path of the Nine Underworld. He quickly flew to the front of the space barrier, and then the Path of the Nine Underworld extended a pitch-black path, trying to penetrate and disintegrate the layer of space barrier. But to Long Yu's surprise, the time needed for his Path of the Nine Underworld to disintegrate the layer of space barrier was definitely more than the time it took for the Fire God race to kill him. Without any other choice, Long Yu could only activate the Book of Shadows, his whole body disguised as the power of the space barrier. Then he integrated into it and finally escaped from the other side of the space barrier. Finally, he turned into nothingness. Long Yu's figure once again disappeared without trace. The hundreds of Fire God race sovereigns were extremely agitated. They constantly used their magical abilities and fire attacks in the direction where Long Yu disappeared in some areas in front of him. Unfortunately, since Long Yu was hiding, how could he let them hit him? Someone used a secret martial arts technique in Long Yu's small world to transmit power. Long Yu didn't have to worry about his power drying up. Moreover, among the 1,500 human race sovereigns, there was more than one who knew the secret martial arts technique. There was a small logistics team with hundreds of people who actually knew the secret martial arts technique. This secret martial arts technique wasn't rare in the human race and the Fey race. It could even be said to be a cheap secret martial arts technique in the battlefield between the human race and the Fey race. It was easy to learn, but generally, it wasn't very useful. It could only occasionally play a supporting role. Therefore, those who didn't have much ability could directly cultivate the power transmission technique. That way, they could still be of some use on the battlefield and earn some contributions. Although Long Yu escaped the enemy's encirclement this time, he was still very puzzled. He didn't know why the other party insisted on chasing him. It had to be known that this place wasn't far from the nearest battlefield fortress of the human race. If the Fire God race sovereigns encountered some human race patrol legion, they would definitely be annihilated. They were taking such a huge risk to annihilate the human race's ruler's army. This was clearly strange. Long Yu didn't believe that the Fire God race were stupid. The only explanation was that the human race sovereigns carried something very important to the Fire God race. Chapter 1423. In fact, Long Yu was really wrong. The Fire God race was so unscrupulously and stubbornly chasing after a target. It was very likely that it was not because the target was carrying something, but because they had a grudge against the target. Of course, the human race and the Fire God race had long been on bad terms with each other. However, racial hatred was not enough to make the other party chase after a ruler legion. The real reason was that the human race's ruler legion had killed an important figure of the Fire God race when they were carrying out a mission. Because of this, the backer of that important figure kept sending Fire God race's ruler legion to annihilate the human race's ruler legion and avenge that important figure. Of course, Long Yu did not know these reasons at all for the time being. All he knew was that as he continued to escape from the encirclement, he was getting closer and closer to the human battlefield fortress. Patrolling armies began to appear in the surroundings. Every patrolling army consisted of great sovereigns, and their combat strength was extremely high. They were there to ensure that they would be able to report back to the battlefield fortress the moment they discovered a situation. The first patrol legion squad that Long Yu encountered had a total of 18 great dominators. The captain was a 6th phase Great Dominator, and the rest of the members ranged from 3rd phase Great Dominators to 5th phase Great Dominators. As soon as he met someone, Long Yu directly went forward, showed his first-class honor badge, and briefly explained the situation he was facing. Those who could join the patrol legion in this kind of place were all experts and had rich experience in fighting against foreign races. After hearing Long Yu's words, they immediately came up with a countermeasure. The captain frowned and said, "This kind of situation has happened before. Although it is possible that they are carrying something very important to the Fire God race, it is more likely that the ruler legion killed an important figure of the Fire God race, so they were targeted. After all, there are not many things that can make the Fire God race so crazy, but there are many important figures that the Fire God race desperately wants to take revenge. You two go and report the situation here to the battlefield fortress. The rest of us will escort little brother Long Yu back." It was impossible to help Long Yu defeat the Fire God clan legion that came for revenge with just the 18 people of this patrol team, so they had no other way but to escort Long Yu back first. Fortunately, the Fire God race's great sovereign realm experts wouldn't dare to come here. Otherwise, even if they killed the human race's sovereign realm experts, the Fire God race's great sovereign realm experts wouldn't be able to escape. Once a battle broke out here, human reinforcements would immediately arrive. If multiple armies of sovereigns attacked together, those Fire God race sovereigns wouldn't even be able to stand chance. Following the patrol team, Long Yu soon saw the silhouette of the battlefield fortress and heaved a sigh of relief. But it was also at this time that Long Yu's heart suddenly became vigilant. An extremely bad premonition appeared in his mind, causing him to become frightened and nervous. "Be careful." Long Yu sensed the fire attribute divine text aura around him and immediately knew that the Fire God race had launched another attack. Moreover, the other party was not launching an ordinary attack, but a self-detonation attack. The hundreds of Fire God race's great sovereign realm experts actually broke into the area close to the human race's battlefield fortress and launched a self-detonation attack. At first, the human race patrol team didn't notice anything, but Long Yu relied on intuition to sense the other party's intention. Then, the members of the patrol team realized that something was wrong. Right at this time, the Fire God race's Grand Sovereigns finally appeared in front of them. They had used a tyrannical void teleportation technique to instantly appear in this area. Then they gathered all the energy in their bodies and chose to self-detonate. The self-detonation of a great sovereign realm expert was extremely powerful and could produce chaotic space-time turbulence. This place was not like the space-time tunnel where Long Yu encountered such a situation before. In the space-time tunnel, the Origin 5-element storm on both sides would absorb all power that exceeded a certain level, causing space-time turbulence to form in the space-time tunnel. But now, they were not in the space-time tunnel. The power of the self-detonation of hundreds of Fire God race experts and the space-time turbulence produced was definitely not something that Long Yu could resist. At this moment, Long Yu immediately reacted. Activating the Nether Void Dragon Blade, he wanted to flee out of this region. However, he discovered that the 16 members of the human race's patrol army were all looking at him with funny expressions. What are they doing here instead of running away at this time? Long Yu's heart skipped a beat, but he soon knew why. As the Fire God race experts appeared in this area together and showed the momentum of their self-detonation, another tyrannical aura immediately descended from the sky. Accompanying this tyrannical aura was a torrent of aqua-colored light that filled the sky. Like rain, light blue light descended from the sky and landed in this area. All the Fire God race great rulers that were touched by this blue light had successfully self-detonated, but the power of their self-detonation was absorbed by the blue light and did not explode at all. Not to mention using the power of these self-detonations to kill Long Yu and the others. The water-colored streamers that filled the sky fell and absorbed all the power of the self-detonation, eliminating it into nothingness. The self-detonation crisis of the Fire God race, which seemed extremely serious in Long Yu's eyes, was actually easily resolved. Is it strange? Our battlefield fortress has Lord White Tiger presiding over it. The 6th-phase Great Ruler Patrol Team captain smiled at Long Yu and said, "This area has already entered the battlefield fortress's protection range. There is no need for Lord White Tiger to make a move against this level of Fire God race self-detonation attack. Lord White Tiger's aqua-flowing light array is enough to resolve it." Aqua-flowing light array. Only now did Long Yu realize that this large expanse of watercolored streamers was actually an array. Such a powerful array was actually able to completely suppress and absorb the power of the self-detonation of over 100 great rulers. How terrifying was this? As for the Lord White Tiger that the captain spoke of, Long Yu had heard of him before. He was a demigod expert of the human race that had been guarding the human race's battlefield since the beginning. In terms of fame, Lord White Tiger's reputation was even more resounding than Long Zaition's. It could be said that White Tiger was the guardian god of this direction of the human race's territory. No matter how fierce the attacks of the foreign races were, they would always return in defeat in front of White Tiger. However, Long Yu had never heard of this Lord White Tiger. Whether this Lord White Tiger was a man or a woman, tall or short, fat or thin, in the eyes of ordinary people, demigod experts were very mysterious existences. There were very few cultivators that could see a demigod with their own eyes. White Tiger should be that demigod's title. As for what his real name was, Long Yu had no idea. However, the fact that White Tiger could actually set up such a powerful array, like the aqua-flowing light array, made Long Yu gasp. He couldn't help but ask the Heaven Fire Doyen in his small world, "Senior, can you set up an array similar to this aqua-flowing light array?" Of course, the Heaven Fire Doyen also saw the situation outside. He had been following Long Yu on this journey, and there were many times when he could easily help Long Yu resolve his troubles. However, he did not make a move. After all, Long Yu could deal with it himself, and there was no need for him to help. On the other hand, he didn't want to meddle in other people's business and make Long Yu feel that he could rely on him for everything. However, as the situation changed, especially when Long Yu broke into the encirclement of the Fire God race's demigod army to save people. The Heaven Fire Doyen knew that under such circumstances, even he couldn't affect the overall situation. This was because there were too many demigods of the Fire God race. In a head-on confrontation, the Heaven Fire Doyen wouldn't be a match for them at all. Only Long Yu could escape from such a desperate situation. If it were another person, even the Heaven Fire Doyen himself, he wouldn't be able to break into the encirclement and save 1,500 people before escaping safely. What he saw along the way made him understand Long Yu a lot. At the same time, he also developed a lot of admiration for Long Yu. Obviously, this kid was definitely a natural talent. Although his martial arts realm was still relatively low, once he grew up, his potential would even surpass that of many young geniuses who were sought after by countless people. No wonder he could enter the Demigod College. This kid was indeed extraordinary. Now that Long Yu saw the aqua-flowing light array and asked him this question, the Heaven Fire Doyen was in a difficult position. This was because it was impossible for him to set up such a powerful array. Even if he performed exceedingly well, he wouldn't be able to set up such a powerful array. This is an array constructed by a demigod senior. I can't do anything about it. Moreover, I'm not the best in the field of arrays. The Heaven Fire Doyen answered Long Yu calmly. He didn't feel ashamed about this. After all, he was best at refining weapons. In the field of refining weapons, he was confident that even those demigod experts might not be better at it than him. In terms of refining weapons, the Heaven Fire Doyen was definitely at the peak of the human race and the demon race. There was no doubt about this. Since I want to develop my own force, I must be able to set up a similar array. Otherwise, how can I establish my force in this world? Long Yu squinted his eyes and said, since you don't know how, I'll have to find someone else who's proficient in arrays. That's right. I've said it before. I joined your force only because of my ability in refining weapons. As for arrays, I hope you can find a stronger senior for me to learn from. The Heaven Fire Doyen said calmly. I'll pay attention. If there's a suitable candidate, I'll definitely invite him to join us at all costs. Long Yu had agreed to the Heaven Fire Doyen. This matter had indeed been put on his agenda, but he didn't have a candidate yet. As for roping in a white tiger demigod, it was impossible. Don't even think about it. Chapter 1424. When the aqua-flowing light array appeared and dissipated the power of the self-destruction of the Fire God race powerhouses, those Fire God race powerhouses were sacrificed in vain. It did not affect Long Yu and the others at all. Hundreds of Fire God race, great sovereign powerhouses self-destructed. The scene was spectacular, but unfortunately, it was just a flash in the pan. Immediately afterward, Long Yu returned to the battlefield fortress under the leadership of the patrol army squad. No one came to greet them because the entire battlefield fortress was in a very busy state. Everyone had their own things to do. On the battlefield of the alien races, few people would do things that were just for show. Almost everyone was a pragmatist. Just now, hundreds of Fire God race, great sovereigns, self-destructed nearby. Although it attracted the attention of many people, it had nothing to do with them, so they did not pay attention to it. This situation was very different from the situation in the human territory of the monster race. If this happened in the territory of the human race or the monster race, there would definitely be many people coming to watch and point fingers. But on the battlefield of the alien races, such a situation would never happen. The battlefield fortress immediately sent a team of people to pick up the things left behind by the hundreds of Fire God race powerhouses. Although they all self-destructed and the small worlds turned into ashes, there might still be some things left behind. The things that could be left behind in this situation were definitely not ordinary things, so it was better to clean up the battlefield. Little brother Long, wait here for a while. Someone will come to deal with your matters soon. The captain of the patrol army squad said to Long Yu, then left Long Yu with his team members, leaving Long Yu to wait alone in a corner of a hall. This hall was the mission hall of this battlefield fortress. The entire battlefield fortress presented a silver-white, streamlined style. Compared with the steel fortress of the Sky Dragon Legion, it was more imposing. People came and went in the mission hall, and few people would pay attention to others. Perhaps because the battle here was more intense, the atmosphere in the battlefield fortress was more tense and somber than on the monster race's side. On the monster race's side, some things could attract a lot of people's attention, but here, not many people would pay attention to other people's affairs. Everyone was in a hurry to complete their own experience or strategic tasks. Long Yu's strategic mission had been completed, and he had also saved 1,500 people from the Sovereign Army. What kind of rewards would he receive? Of course, the army on the battlefield would take care of all these things. Soon, a middle-aged man in leather armor, who looked like the person in charge, walked towards Long Yu with 2 storage rings in his hand. The man had a serious expression on his face. When he saw Long Yu, he immediately saluted and said, "You are Long Yu, right? Come with me first. You have a lot of things to do here. Of course, this is your reward for completing the strategic mission. I'll give it to you first." After saying that, he tossed one of the storage rings to Long Yu. Long Yu caught the storage ring and sank his consciousness into it to take a look. He discovered that there were 2 cards inside, and each card could be exchanged for 1 million army contribution points. This was his reward for completing the strategic mission, which was to construct the transmission array and rescue the surrounded Sovereign Army. He didn't expect it to be worth 2 million army contribution points. However, thinking about it, this was normal. This strategic mission was extremely difficult, and it was no less difficult than the Fierce Fire Talisman in the Monster Race's territory. Moreover, Long Yu had to complete it alone. If someone shared the rewards with him, there wouldn't be much of a reward. Of course, these rewards weren't much to Long Yu. However, to other ordinary cultivators, 2 million battle merit points could provide them with a year's worth of cultivation and survival. Even some 5th or 6th stage sovereigns would receive the same amount of merit points. Long Yu put away the jade slip and followed the middle-aged man into the depths of the fortress. He knew that he had to deal with the 1,500 sovereign realm experts in his small world. Right now, the human race's sovereign army only had 1,500 sovereign realm experts left. The rest, including their commander, had all died at the hands of the fire god race's sovereign realm experts. Therefore, how to settle these people down was a big problem. These people had died on the battlefield, and they had lost their entire army. Naturally, the battlefield army had to take responsibility for their deaths. Otherwise, who would be willing to risk their lives on the battlefield? Responsibility was one aspect, and power and protection were 2 other aspects. Both were indispensable. The mission of protecting the human race couldn't be handed over to those with a strong sense of duty. That wasn't enough. There had to be enough benefits to attract more people to join the battlefield army. Long Yu followed the leather-armored middle-aged man to a room inside the fortress. This room was very big. It was like a martial arts practice field. There was a very large space inside. At the entrance of the room, there were several sovereign realm experts in charge of the human race. When they saw that Long Yu was brought in, they nodded at the middle-aged man in leather armor. The person in charge smiled and walked towards Long Yu. "Little brother Long, I already know what happened to you. There should be quite a few sovereign realm experts in your small world, right? Since you saved them, the battlefield army will reward you. For every person you save, you will receive 10,000 battlefield army merit points. How about it?" This person spoke to Long Yu in a negotiating tone. "Actually, we also know that it's not appropriate to use the contribution points of the Legion on the battlefield to calculate human lives. But right now, the Legion of Rulers has suffered heavy casualties. Our Legion on the battlefield has to pay a lot of compensation for those who died. I understand what you're saying." Long Yu waved his hand, indicating that the other party didn't need to say anything more. Long Yu didn't save people for money. Now that the other party was willing to pay 10,000 battlefield army merit points per person, it was already very good for him. After all, he had saved 1,500 people. That added up to 15 million battlefield army merit points. This amount of battlefield army merit points was enough for him to use for a short period of time. At the very least, it was enough to buy Divine Ascension wine in 2 months. One had to know that Red Oriole had been completing missions at the Demigod Institute. The number of battlefield army merit points she had earned was probably even more than Long Yu. As for the Divine Ascension wine, even in the Demigod Institute, they could only brew a dozen bottles every 6 months. $4 million per bottle was more than enough for him and Red Oriole to buy it all. 10,000 is enough. Should I let them come out to this hall now? Long Yu looked around and asked. That's right. Many thanks for little brother Long's understanding. The person in charge nodded his head happily and pointed to the center of the hall. You can let them gather in the center. We need to count the number of people and other information. After that, we'll give you the battlefield army merit points. Long Yu nodded his head in response. He circulated his world energy and released the 1,500 sovereign secret realm experts he had saved from his small world. Those sovereign secret realm experts also knew what kind of situation they were facing. When they came out of Long Yu's small world, they couldn't help but thank Long Yu. After all, it was Long Yu who had saved their lives. Long Yu responded to them one by one. Very soon, the 1,500 people were released and gathered in the center. According to what had been said before, the battlefield army gave Long Yu 15 million battlefield army merit points. Then, they began to arrange the remaining 1,500 people. As for what their fate would be, Long Yu could guess. They would either continue to serve in the battlefield army and join another sovereign secret realm army, or they would retire and receive a sum of battlefield army merit points. The choice was entirely up to them. The battlefield army would never force others. Hence, there was no need for Long Yu to participate in the following matters. After all, he had saved them. From now on, this matter had nothing to do with him anymore. However, just as he was about to turn around and leave, among the 1,500 sovereign secret realm experts, there was a 5th stage sovereign realm senior captain. He quickly ran towards Long Yu and handed a jade slip to Long Yu. Hero, this is a gift of gratitude from all 1,500 of us. If it weren't for you, all 1,500 of us would have died in that star field. So please accept it. Gift of gratitude? Long Yu felt a little strange, but since something was delivered to his doorstep, he naturally wouldn't reject it. Many thanks, everyone. I'll take my leave first. I'm in a bit of a rush. Long Yu nodded his head, and his eyes narrowed as he said to the senior captain. Actually, there's one more thing, the senior captain whispered to Long Yu. Many of us would like to follow you in the future. What do you think? Hearing this, Long Yu was a little surprised. He had never thought of bringing these people along. I'm just passing by the battlefield army. I'll be back at the Demigod Academy soon. Long Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could only shake his head and refuse. Even though they were experts from the sovereign secret realm, Huang Xiaolong didn't need them to follow him. There weren't many experts from the sovereign secret realm in the Void Galaxy, but he could easily gather them with cultivation resources. Moreover, since these people were from the battlefield army, Long Yu wouldn't be able to poach them. Demigod Academy, Demigod Academy. I knew that a sharp young man like you would definitely be someone with great achievements. All right, since you don't want us, we'll continue to fight in the battlefield army. I hope that one day we can fight side by side with you again. The senior captain said with a little pity. Long Yu nodded, then turned around and left. He casually flipped through the jade slip in his hand, and what he found shocked him. This jade slip actually contained an extremely high amount of battlefield army merit. 30 million. These 1,500 people basically contributed 20,000 of their own, adding up to 30 million battlefield army merit. They gave it to Long Yu as a thank you gift for Long Yu saving them. Chapter 1425. Kid, you've made a fortune. Heaven Fire Doyen, who was staying in his small world, immediately knew that Long Yu had received the 30 million battlefield military merit points. He clicked his tongue and said, 30 million. You can buy dozens of infinity-level soldiers with it. You're making money faster than me. But TSK. Kid, You're pretty good. It's hard to come across such an opportunity to save people. Even if it were someone else, they wouldn't be able to save these people alive like you did. Thinking about it this way, it's hard to earn 30 million. It's just that in your hands, kid. It's inexplicably easy. Long Yu dismissed Heaven Fire Doyen's words with a smile. Instead, he asked Heaven Fire Doyen, Senior, is there anything you need to buy? Since it's convenient now, you might as well buy them all now. It'll save you the trouble of going to the market later. Well, then listen carefully. These things will be useful in the future, and they're very expensive. Heaven Fire Doyen didn't stand on ceremony. He told Long Yu the names of several materials. But when Long Yu heard that, he smiled. I already have these materials in my organization. There's no need to buy them. You'll be able to use them immediately when you get there. That's right. Long Yu and Little White had already bought all the materials that Heaven Fire Doyen had mentioned in one go when they exchanged the alien demigod corpses. Heaven Fire Doyen was dumbfounded when he heard Long Yu's words. Every one of the materials he mentioned was very expensive. Even if Long Yu spent all the 30 million on them, he might not be able to buy them all. But now, Long Yu was telling him that he had already prepared the materials. Without a doubt, Long Yu had shocked Heaven Fire Doyen once again, and he believed that Long Yu wouldn't lie to him. What good would it do him to lie to him about something like this? If Long Yu couldn't take them out by then, he would only be hurting himself. Long Yu's abilities seemed to have far exceeded the Heaven Fire Doyen's initial expectations. In fact, it even refreshed his understanding of Long Yu time and time again. Every time, Heaven Fire Doyen thought that he had overestimated Long Yu. However, he soon realized that not only did he not overestimate Long Yu, but he had also underestimated him. This made Heaven Fire Doyen somewhat melancholic. Was he really getting old? These youngsters are actually so crazy now. Right now, Long Yu only had the cultivation of a superior ruler. If he stepped into the Grand Ruler realm, or even rose all the way to the 7th stage Grand Ruler realm, wouldn't his ability be even more terrifying? It could even affect the overall situation of the human race and the demon race. Needless to say, Heaven Fire Doyen had a hunch that Long Yu was very likely to step into the demigod level. If that was really the case, then Long Yu could definitely be said to be one of the pillars of the human race. The overall strength of the human race would increase by a huge margin. Of course, all of this seemed to be a little far away. Heaven Fire Doyen didn't think too much about it. He only hoped that he could reach a higher level on the path of refining weapons and study spirit designs more deeply. If it was possible, he hoped that he could also obtain the opportunity to step into the demigod level. Long Yu didn't leave the battlefield fortress immediately. Instead, he chose some cultivation resources in the battlefield fortress's trading hall. He paid 15 million battlefield merit points to purchase 3 third-grade Heaven Crystal Creation items. This was something he could use to break through to the Great Ruler realm. After spending the 15 million, he still had 30 million battlefield merit points, which was completely enough to purchase the Divine Connecting Wine, so he didn't worry about not having enough. He also wanted to buy a Shadow Essence to strengthen his other innate techniques. Unfortunately, this kind of thing could only be found by chance. Even though he had enough battlefield merit points, there was no Shadow Essence for sale in this battlefield fortress. He couldn't buy it even if he wanted to. Shadow Essence, Space Essence, Ice Essence. These were all treasures that could strengthen innate techniques. As for how they were produced, Long Yu didn't know. He only obtained a Space Essence and an Ice Essence from the remains of the demigod of the Ice God clan. The Space Essence was integrated into the Path of the Nine Nether, which gave the Path of the Nine Nether the ability to disintegrate all spatial power. As for the Ice Essence, it was auctioned off in the Demigod Academy to Tian Qingxue, a new student of the Twin Demon Clan. It was a great harvest. Unfortunately, it wasn't so easy for him to get more essence. This kind of thing was extremely rare in the first place, not to mention that what Long Yu needed was the Shadow Essence. He didn't know if the Shadow Essence was produced in the territories of the human race and the demon race. Long Yu knew that the Ice Essence was produced in the Ice God clan's territory. Frost, the leader of one of the factions in the Demigod Academy, had been in the Ice God clan's territory for a long time. She had almost gathered all the ice essence. If there was a chance, Long Yu wanted to ask around and find out where he could get shadow essence. As long as it was possible, he would work hard. After buying the 3 creation items, Long Yu left the battlefield fortress. He headed in the direction of the human territory. In about 2 days, he would reach the edge of the galaxy. However, at this time, he received news from Red Oriole. Red Oriole and Moonsong had just accepted a new academy mission. They were directly teleported to the Outsiders battlefield. They were actually not far from Long Yu. This surprised Long Yu. He had originally wanted to return to the Outer Realms or even the human territory to meet up with Red Oriole. He didn't expect her to coincidentally come to the Outsiders battlefield. Since that was the case, there was no need for Long Yu to return. Instead, he chose to meet up with Red Oriole. In the silent void, Long Yu saw Red Oriole and Moonsong. The 2 women were waiting for Long Yu to arrive. They were also discussing the academy mission. "You're here." When they saw Long Yu, Red Oriole and Moonsong's eyes lit up. In the time that they hadn't seen each other, Long Yu had risen from a lower ruler to a higher ruler. This was a huge change. Although they were already mentally prepared, the 2 women were still shocked when they saw him in person. Among the 2 women, Red Oriole was the only one who had advanced a rank in the martial Tao during this period of time. Like Moonsong, she had become a 3rd stage sovereign. Moonsong hadn't changed much. She was still a 3rd stage ruler. However, she wasn't far from becoming a 4th stage ruler. She would most likely be able to break through in a short period of time. Compared to the time when they carried out the first academy's training together, the current team of 3 was clearly much stronger. Just Long Yu alone was already at least 10 times stronger than before. If Long Yu were to encounter another alien like the one from before, he could easily subdue it and have Red Oriole and Moonsong kill it with everything they had. Moreover, there were still many corpses of Fire God race experts sealed in Long Yu's ancient Dragon Bone Tower. In another 5 days, he would be able to turn a 5th stage ruler Fire God race expert into a darkness creature. When that time came, the combat strength of the trio would at least double. Is this mission difficult? Long Yu first asked the other party. It's hard to say. The situation isn't very clear yet. The first step of this mission is to investigate. In other words, the mission issuer hasn't even investigated the situation here. Red Oriole shook her head, then said to Long Yu, "The mission objective is to intercept an Abyss race assassin. Apparently, there's news that an Abyss race assassin has come to human territory to spy. They want us to intercept and kill him. However, we have no idea where this Abyss race assassin will appear. Moreover, the Abyss race's physical bodies are too strong. If it's an Abyss race assassin above the 5th stage ruler level, I'm afraid we won't be able to break through his defenses even if we work together." Moonsong was a little worried. "Don't worry about that. As long as we can find the target, defeating him shouldn't be a problem." Long Yu shook his head and chuckled. Right now, he was mainly relying on the unbounded grasp and warring celestial body, as well as the ancient Dragonbone Pagoda and the 9 Serenities military order to unleash a horde of creatures of darkness. With that said, Long Yu took out the unbounded martial skill jade slips he had obtained earlier. It was a high-grade unbounded martial skill that could only be cultivated by the Yao race. It was a control-type move called Binding Demon Shadow, which was perfect for Red Oriole to cultivate. It was a control-type martial skill similar to the Unbounded Grasp. Since Red Oriole's cultivation base was higher than Long Yu's, the power of the Binding Demon Shadow would definitely surpass Long Yu's Unbounded Grasp. As for Moonsong, Long Yu originally didn't plan on giving her anything. But after thinking about it, Moonsong and Red Oriole's relationship was already very good, and the 3 of them would be working together for a long time. So, Long Yu took out the high-grade, unbounded martial skill and gave it to Moonsong. Long Yu had obtained 3 high-grade, unbounded martial skills from the remnants of the Bone Race. One of them was the Binding Demon Shadow, and the other was an Ice-type Yao race cultivation method. He had no use for them at the moment. The last one was a high-grade, unbounded martial skill that both humans and Yaoreis could use. It was a movement skill called 9 Firmament Star Flash. Long Yu wasn't sure how effective it was, but he didn't have the time to cultivate it at the moment. If he wanted to unleash the full power of 9 Firmament Star Flash, he would have to cultivate it to the transcendent realm at the very least. But right now, Long Yu didn't have the time. Not to mention, 9 Firmament Star Flash was best suited for light-type divine characters. In this regard, Long Yu was clearly at a disadvantage. He didn't have any accomplishments in light-type divine characters. But Moonsong was different. The divine runes that this girl comprehended were originally the power of star divine runes, one of the light attribute divine runes. Moreover, her compatibility with light attribute divine runes had already reached the 10th level. It could be said that her compatibility with light attribute divine runes far surpassed Long Yu's by dozens of galaxies. It could be said that 9 Firmament Star Flash was very suitable for Moonsong. After receiving the martial skill Jade Slip, Moonsong looked a little embarrassed. Her face immediately turned red. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.